Hello and welcome to the 6 Plus show, a podcast for your wargaming and 40k needs. Hobby talk, tactics, tournament reports, lore and much more. We have it all. Please welcome your host for the evening, Tom.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and parachuting falchions to that 6 Plus show. If your attention span is Horus Lupercal, then we are the Chaos Gods, vying jealously to hold it in sway in this teeming world of distractions. Much like the Chaos Gods, there may now be a few too many of us, and the end results of our schemes may vary accordingly. Smashing the UK TC circuit, bearing the torch for the bang average, bringing our best and playing the game the right way. We are the Pluse, and we are Legion. I am your host, Tom. I'm back in the chair, and I've got to be on form because there was a very good episode without me last week that I listened to and thought, oh, God, they don't need me at all.
I
need to step up. It was really good. I really liked it.
You are surplus to requirements.
Exactly.
Surplus to requirements, in fact.
Surplus to requirements is great.
That is my one contractual
It's starting
joke,
well.
I think.
Goodbye.
Yeah,
Great.
every time we ever get rid of anyone, can we make sure that we tell them that they're surplus to requirements? We can announce it on Facebook.
Yes.
I am joined tonight by a whole team of all-stars, but first and foremost, of course, is my dear leader, Chris. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm very well, thank you.
Chris, is there anything new in your hobby 40k life?
I played a game of 40k with Admech, and it wasn't against myself.
Oh, very good.
Found a friend.
Oh, yeah, my friend, Mr. Jamie Easton, his Iron Hands, and it was so much fun. What I found really interesting is that when I used to play Admech, when they were at their height, didn't actually really enjoy playing the army per se. They were just obviously very powerful.
I know that one.
Yeah, but playing the game and just it's so different to having played Harlequins. It's just a complete. You've got big blobs, and you've got. Oh, you should be scared to stick your head out with your dreadnoughts because I can blap them all with my las chickens and stuff. And you want to fire your entire Iron Hands army into this 20-man Ranger block? Well, I want a 2-up save, and it doesn't matter what you're shooting. And I had so much fun playing it, and it was like an 80-something, 60-something win, and especially on conversion, which actually really it was not a great map for either of us because you can hide everywhere.
Yeah.
But no, I really enjoyed playing the army. So I got a game against Mr. Jamie Clifford and his Grey Knights in a day or two. I'm just trying to test the army out. I do actually think it has good play, and I've got getting in tech pieces. Because the main issue is if someone can get into all your shooting units at the same time. Because then obviously you can't bring your firepower to bear. You don't have much combat threat at all in the list. So I'm just introducing ways of kind of holding that off. Like the techno-archaeologist, for example, who has a 12-inch.
That's the one I like. He's the Clamorous for you, isn't he? He does the same thing.
Yeah, 12-inch. Yep. No deep strike. I had a fullback and shoot. I've now got another form of fullback and shoot in there. I've got 2 units of Cerberus Raiders who are very good at screening, but when they're charged, you can move. It's for 2 CP, but you can do a normal move, so 12 inches away. Those sorts of things are really good into like demons and that sort of thing.
Super good. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm kind of taking in the stuff. So now it's the next step is playing all the missions on UKTC and working out how to deploy. Like, for example, the 2 4-man Iron Striders. It's actually really hard to know where to put them to then get firing lanes for the future turns. So it's like just learning where to put the units. And then I think the actual game plan is really pretty standard. You buff up your Vanguard and you go stick them in the middle and say, deal with me. And if they choose not to deal with you, you sort of blap with your Vanguard until they die. And you're like, all right, I'm going to do the same with my Rangers. And it's, meanwhile, you've got all the shooting threats. So I've enjoyed it.
It sounds like you've enjoyed it. That's really exciting. That's
taking
fun.
them to Manchester.
Yeah. Sweet. Oh, amazing. That'll be really fun.
Just fine-tuning the list at the moment, but I'm pretty much there now. I've got one decision left to make, really, which is whether I take a 7 and a 6 of Rust Stalkers, so like 2 medium-strength combat units, or do I take 1 10-man unit of Rust Stalkers, which are really good at things. Because they need CP, really, to do well.
They do, yeah.
For the extra attack, the extra strength and stuff. Or do I take a 10-man, and then that probably will give me room for like more plasma, maybe another naked 5-man to just screen and that sort of thing. That's the final decision I've got to make. yeah, happy with how the list is looking.
That's actually massively exciting. I'm really looking forward to seeing how you get on with that. It's nice to see one of the old favourites come back, and they're one of those armies where it's like there's some power there, but actually there's not that many people playing with it, and that's really exciting, right? You can get creative and you can be on the front line with it, and that's super fun.
I feel like
their win rate's totally in the bin, right?
Pardon?
Their win rate's totally in the bin.
It's not great, but I think a lot more experience with 40k since I last played them, and you kind of, having played the Harleys, you kind of know what powerful armies you can do, and you can see how this is powerful.
Yeah,
on the table.
And I think it will like UKTC as well.
Yes, exactly.
The angles you can cut on that.
Touching the terrain and shooting out whilst being on, and therefore being on area terrain, so you get +1 to your save, on top of being +1 to your save against 1 damage for Lucius, on top of your cover save, on top of the fact that you're ignoring AP 1 and 2, means that you can kind of just shoot with impunity with one unit.
I remember how nuts it felt at the time. So it's like, it's just the whole board you've got, really. Or the relevant board. The bit of it you actually get points from. All of that board.
Yeah.
So, man, they were the terror, right?
They were very scary. It'll be really cool to see if they can make a comeback. That would be very exciting indeed. Okay, great. Well, we've got a whole bunch of all-stars here. You've just heard his dulcet tones, so I'll start with you, Davey. How are you doing? What's new in your world?
Well, hello. Yeah, same old, really. Hitting up local tournaments, and every one of them. There isn't one that can survive without me attending. I'm like Beetlejuice. You just say you just say 40k 3 times in the room, and I'm on the BCP app. It's weird. I just appear.
Excellent.
But all good. Obviously, still pushing Tyranids. I had a really interesting weekend playing 2 events, 2 different lists, and it was a lot of fun. Been eyeing up a bit of eBay Black Templars, and Arin.
Interesting.
I know, and Arin. But I was just talking to Aaron about it, and I was like, like every army that I've fancied, like I bought some Chaos, and I didn't really go with it in the end. And I don't want to do that again. And I kind of think that sometimes other armies are a bit like when I was at uni, like the girls I used to fancy at uni, it was actually better fancying them than actually going out with them.
It's the thrill of the chase. It's the thrill of the chase.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That is not where I thought that was going. That's just veered so far off what I thought that was going to end up.
No, I do know what you mean. It's a grass is greener thing, Davey. There's definitely that.
Yeah, 100%, man.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm very lucky. I went with Tyranids this time last year when I decided to, and ended up pulling like the most varied, dynamic army probably in 40k.
I was going to say, you just love Tyranids, Davey, and just accept that, and that's what you play.
Yeah, man.
Being a specialist. Embrace it.
Yeah.
But I've had this weird feeling, man. I've had this weird feeling the last, I want to say 3 days, where I just wanted to buy a model, right? And I just could not decide what to buy. And I was like, but I could just go and buy like a Castellian Black Templar model and just paint it. Why not? But then I'm just going to have like a box full of assorted models. I'm always amazed by people who paint models, right? On YouTube channels, they paint all these models. And then what? Do they just go in a box in the garage, never to be seen again?
Display case, David.
Oh man, that just I'm too northern to have that much money sat in my garage, man. I can't deal with it. Anyway, sorry, I've gassed on.
No, it's exciting. I think the next army thing is always difficult. I think it's worth just playing a few things and seeing if you enjoy playing them. And I know that Lee Jones's Black Templars are sat not doing much right now. So if you ask very nicely, he might let you try his.
What you could do as well is you could download Tabletop Simulator. I finally have a friend in 6++ who will suffer through the online struggles of TTS. Yes. It's great. You can practice into Tau. I'll play a bit of Tau.
Dark Angels.
Tau? Great variety in there.
Mate, go speak to Tactical Tortoise. This isn't that channel.
Yeah, well, I just wish I had some friends.
Yeah, we need to get Ed some TTS friends. How are you doing, Ed? Welcome. This is the first time I think we've both been on show at the same time, so excited to see how the hell this goes. How are you doing? What's your 40k life like at the minute?
Well, I hope it's more civil than the last time we played 40k, where we just abused each other across the tabletop for 3 hours.
You were really angry with me. You were really angry with me.
No, only in a comedy outrage sort of way, as is my way. No, terrible. I've got awful neck ache. I've woken up and I've pulled a muscle, and I've lost to Dark Angels. So life is awful, and there's no point. No, not again yet. I haven't lined it up. To be fair, so people have been talking about the Tau versus Dark Angels matchup, saying that it's a 0-20 on WTC scoring.
An 11-9, right?
My goal is on the optimal map to get an 11-9 win into Dark Angels, and I played against Ben Pritchard, who is fantastic. He's a very good Dark Angels player. He was third Dark Angels last year, and I got a 8-12 loss into him. Again, on the best deployment map, but it is Tides of Conviction, because it's the only one where you can shoot them from a distance. That's really
is that the best one to play against them? I lost against them on that one on the weekend.
Well, if you're playing Tau, specifically, yeah.
It was a little quite as ideal for Drakari, but
it was a little bit different when you were playing Yannari. Oh, was that this weekend just gone?
Yeah, this weekend just gone.
Oh, wow. I'll have to congratulate him for.
It wasn't Ben Pritchard. It was a very good Dark Angels list.
Sure. Yeah. But no. So I'm in pain, and I've lost to Dark Angels. So as I said in the video that's coming out, I've had to ritualistically shave my head.
Yes, you can see that. Yeah.
As honor dictates, and if I win some games, if I win some games at Manchester, then I will allow myself to grow the hair back.
So in addition to losing to Dark Angels, you've lost some hair, or are you just trying to imitate me? After our discussions last week, it was like, I want to be him. I want his energy.
The thing I hate the most.
All my hair.
There's a falchion in my garage.
It's another one at Manchester. Then we got a good contingent going to Manchester, by the sounds of it. That's going to be exciting. And you will also have heard that the one and only Lewis is here.
Hello,
Lewis. How are things? How are you doing?
Things are good, thank you. My after last week, my falchion has gone from a big yellow brick to a big yellow brick with some black and silver on it. Yeah, a little bit of red as well. Because is there any other colour that you can do fuel barrels other than red? So no, it's now the tank. We could do the Modern Earth.
Yeah, that was a revelation last week. That was a whole experience.
As tempting as it was to add Modern Earth onto £275 worth of Forge World models, I didn't quite go with it. That's the other thing about the falchion we didn't talk about last week, because I'm going to go off on falchions now, so settle in everyone, is that it's so expensive and it's the worst model in the world to build. But that's it. But I have it now battle ready, so I will be moving on to other things. Yeah, I posted into the 6++ Discord, so check it out.
It does look very nice.
It has, but it's on there now. So I've not done any highlighting or any weathering or anything like that, because I haven't got time before Gibraltar, because I'll get the rest of the army done. So they're all just going to have yellow and then glazes and washes, and then that's it. Also almost sold out the Southampton GT, which is very exciting. Got 3 tickets left as of recording.
Apparently it's a Shark Tank these days, anyway.
Well, there are some very good players, excluding all the Pluse lot.
Yeah. We just lose to some other. There's some other team that beat us, apparently.
That's really exciting. And then just confirmed the Sigmar Slam for 2nd and 3rd of June for our Age of Sigmar contingent, also in Saffron Walden.
I think I might do that. That'd
be really good. And the world famous Jack Tite is going to be running that with me, because I don't know anything about Sigmar, so I'm going to look at the cool models and make everyone tea and coffee all weekend. He's going to run it, but he's going to use my terrain and stuff. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, super exciting. So when's the Gibraltar deadline for your Imperial Fist?
Gibraltar GT, we are flying out on the 23rd of April.
Okay.
So I've got a month and a bit to get. Yeah. I've got another 5 heavy intercessors, 10 normal intercessors, 4 centurions, and 3 characters to paint.
Obviously, good stuff. Absolutely.
It's just yellow, isn't it? You have to do so many layers to get yellow done. That what you think is only going to take an hour, it took me 2 hours this morning before work, just touching up the mistakes on the falchion for where the wash had overrun and things like that. 2 hours just going around it, doing tiny little bits of yellow.
Do you airbrush your yellow, or do you brush paint it?
Do it all by hand, mate. All by hand.
You're unwell.
White and yellow by
Why
hand.
would you do that to
without
yourself?
a brush?
No brush at all. I just lick it.
Finger painting.
Smear it on with your finger.
Smear it on.
All I'm saying is I think you'd win best painted if you did it with your hands.
Yeah, I do finger painting. I just get a load of 5-year-olds around and they'll just go all over it. But no, yeah.
I mean, that was a key step in my my Modern Earth painting. Give 2-year-olds some brushes and
I was
have a
going to
wear.
say, genuinely, you couldn't you just farm it out? You could do a little sweatshop and get loads of people to pay for your models.
6++ does not condone indentured slavery in the modern era.
Why was I taking a drink there? I just did a legitimate spit take. For fuck's sake.
Oh dear. Yeah, no, that's good. As and when that army's ready, as I say, listening to the show last time, it awoke something horrible in the back of my head. I had some Iron Warriors I started painting in lockdown, and I've lacked a genuine nemesis to run them into, because other than playing into Imperial Fist, I don't really think there's any point playing Iron Warriors at the moment. They're not especially brilliant, but they are lovely to paint. And so I might have to challenge you to some sort of stupid battle report where there's lots of tanks running around on the board.
I will accept your duel.
As and when you're ready to go. Yeah, that would be very fun to do.
Do the Iron Warriors have a stratagem that works against Imperial Fists?
Oh, you bet they do. They absolutely do. Do you
so I
have
think
one
if you give a Falchion, if I give a Falchion full rerolls to hit and wound, I reckon
that'll hurt, won't it? Yeah,
it certainly will.
It's fair to say I think first turn might be quite big in that. Because someone's going to use full rerolls to hit and wound on a huge tank, and it's just going to be a question of what's left after that's happened.
What I might do is do that on all the Centurions, and the big blob of 6 Centurions, give them hitting on 2s, give them +1 to wound, full rerolls hit and wound, and I have one Centurion shoot at one individual Iron Warriors unit and just see what's left afterwards.
Just see how much of it you can pick up. Yeah, bring it on. I'm well up for it.
It's on. It's happening. You're going down.
Absolutely. It was also partly inspired because I watched Iron Within on Warhammer Plus. I don't know if you guys have watched that yet, but it's like a 1.5 hour episode in which there's Drukhari running around, there's Iron Warriors, there's some Imperial Guard. It's very, very cool. Really, really cool bit of TV. One of the better things I've watched on Warhammer Plus so far. I think I've introduced all of you now. Have I missed anyone? No, we're good.
Yourself.
Good. Oh, myself. You know who I am. I haven't done anything massively exciting. I have painted some Hearthguard for my Votan this week, and I'm quite happy with how they're looking. I just need to do the basing, and then they'll be good to go. I'm really trying to take it very slowly with the Votan. Not least because it's not like there's any particularly decent rules to rush them to table with at the moment. I just want to make sure they're nice and pretty. The next on the list is the big hammer champion guy, Mr. Punchy Fist. I can't remember what his name is. Iron Here champion. Iron Here something. He looks very fun. So that's what I've been doing. And obviously I was at an event as well this weekend. So that's what we'll do next. What we're going to do tonight, we're going to talk events very briefly. Me and Davey have been between us to 3 events. And then we're going to talk about how to be a good opponent in 40k, which is something hopefully in our many events that we've been to, we've picked up some experience about what makes for good and bad sort of opponents during the game. We'll think about before, during, and after games and different things you can do to sort of, I think we're thinking a little bit about being a good sport, but also I think just generally being a fun experience, being a good and worthy foe for the opponent. And then we'll do some listener questions at the end. But before any of that, we're really good at self-promoting these days, like very good. And to demonstrate that, Chris is going to do the Pluse roundup.
We haven't really done anything.
Chris, yes.
I can feel the subscribers.
The subs are still going up. The views are still going up.
Too big to fail, baby.
It's been we've had some technical difficulties. So the podcast, for some whatever reason, Premiere Pro didn't want to upload it in any way. I'm not saying there's a theme here, but both times Lewis has been on, it's not worked.
YouTube just can't handle me.
That's YouTube can't handle Lewis. So if this happens a third time,
too damn sexy.
No, it's definitely Lewis. And then Aaron sent me his towel video, and then it turned out it didn't send. So the next day he sent it, and then I went to edit it, and he'd not put any of the slides on, or it didn't show the slides. Just showed his introduction was like, people have said they get distracted by my face, so don't worry. You won't be seeing my face. And then for the next 15 minutes,
just his face. Nice.
Aaron uses the same thing as me, and mine did that last time I tried to send you one. So I wonder if we need to check that's actually doing what it's supposed to.
Ed uses.
Okay.
The share screen button.
Yeah. So we did have Davey's Bug Watch, which came out. But in terms of what's coming up, we've got a battle
Damn for
report.
Tyranids.
We've got more Tyranid stuff. The next Bug Watch. We've got Ed, Union UKTC, which will be on Mission 4. We've got Tom is going to be producing some videos. Which
Yeah, we've got the Ugandan Wraith host is finally going to get out there. We've got GSC best units. I think I'll probably do GSC best traits as well and just get a couple of things done this week.
And perhaps most excitingly, we are going to be, touchwood, making the transition to streaming the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Unfiltered us. Even worse.
Live. We've got to do a test run. I've kind of done my research, worked out how it goes. We're going to do a unlisted test where we make sure it all works. But then, assuming it does, we will have a go at being live next Tuesday, 8:30. But we'll plug that on the Discord, Instagram, Facebook page, YouTube page, all the general stuff. We'll plug that. But yeah, that's the plan. So that's very exciting.
Come and validate us. We need it so desperately. Come on.
Yeah, absolutely. What
stream was it the other day? Someone did a £500 super chat. How do we get that?
I think that's
how does that get funneled to me?
I believe. Yeah.
No, that's how it goes. I'm pretty sure next Tuesday someone will super chat us.
Yeah, I think at least 3 or 4 different people will.
That's how it works, right?
Yeah.
To be fair, War Games Live probably has spent more on their stream, I reckon.
Yeah, I mean,
just a little bit.
The overhead on this is pretty substantial.
Ed's haircut is significantly expensive. If every time he has to get his hair shaved, every time he loses, I mean, God, we're going to be here forever.
Oh, that's correct.
We've got rivalries developing. I like it.
You can't be my nemesis, Davey. I've already got a nemesis.
And he's got a big yellow tank.
Isn't it?
He does have a big yellow tank.
So that is the roundup for all of our fans. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, great. Right, event reports. We're going to keep this brief because we've got a whole bunch of other people here who are going to give their opinions and chat, and I don't want to force them to listen to us recap games they've already lived vicariously through on WhatsApp anyway. But Davey, do you want to talk us through your weekend and the one event that you went to?
Well, the one, you mean the two, because I am RTT 2 for me, baby.
Oh, yeah.
So I was at.
Was that
went,
rap? Were you
man.
You, me, and 2 RTTs, I think.
Yeah. On the MIC doing 2 RTT. So I went to the Outriders RTT. And you know what? I'm going to say this. It was the best RTT they've ever done. It was pretty much on par with loads of other local tourneys that we have, which is kind of like the level that everyone's expecting now. Good terrain. Very clear communication, mission packs, all that kind of stuff. They've really upped the game for this one, and it's driven by their new terrain set, which is the UKTC one. But they've mixed it up a little bit, so there's some tables with light, some tables with heavier terrain, and I think that's pretty. I'm a big fan of having a little bit of variety, a little bit of change. So overall, very happy. Ironically, I was on table 3 for the entire tournament, so that's take from that what you will, in terms of what I actually, Anyway, so. In fact, I've actually think about the event, the local amenities and the shop itself. I would say it's actually, edging top end of that the local RTTs, because you've got all the food, you've got the shop, you've got loads of different food options actually. So free parking, all that jazz. It's everything you want from an RTT. So I definitely recommend it. Also, 100% the best price support I think an event I've ever been to.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and they don't big that up enough because it is really strong. Cool, let's get on with the game. So, I went 2-1 with Mark Parker's GT winning double harpy list.
Oh, yeah.
2 Hive Tyrants, loads of Carnifexes, a load of chaff, and 2 harpies. It was really cool. First game, I lost straight away to Demons. The lad came second in the entire event, so I'm not too embarrassed about that one. It was only a couple. I think the last turn, he went and got big primary, so that was that one. Then I got a win against Orcs and then GSC. So
nice.
Yeah, overall a really fun list. Not my style. It is. I think with Turnage you either have to blow your opponent to pieces or try and be cute and score 85, and that's kind of what. I prefer to try and be cute and score 85. while trying to deny a little bit of scoring, and then eke out that win. Whereas this kind of stuff for me, yeah, it was totally fun, but just not my bag. Some armies have no answer for the harpies, which is super fun as well, but obviously not for them. So yeah, in fact, neither of the harpies died the entire RTT. So take from that. Yeah. So I bumped into Darren from Twisted Dice at the event at the Outriders, and I said, "You got a space tomorrow, mate?" And he's like, "Yep." I'm like, "Okay, count me in. I'm there." So logged in a list on Twisted Dice and on BCP, sorry, and I went there the next day. So this was my list.
Did you tailor your list to what was already submitted?
Oh, 100%. Looked at everyone's list and went, right, I'm going to take the Tyranid list that'll beat them all.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes me sad.
Yeah. Cool. But no, so I just took the list that I've been trying to work out for ages, which is the Gorgon list. It was fun. Most notably in this list, it has 2 Tyrannocytes, which is really fun. So it drops about, I think, 75, 80 wounds in front of the opponent and says, deal with that. So while I try and score some points. So I got a win first game against World Eaters. It was a good game. And then a loss to Custodes, really good player called Tom Spicer. He was class, really nice guy to play. The most unluckiest, while I had some of the luckiest rolls ever, but still come out with the loss. Again, it came down to that last turn where he got big primary. And then a loss to Necrons. So, and that was a weird one because I've beaten Necrons most of the time. That was the first time I've lost them in ages. So we're just not, my list just isn't as killy as what the previous Tyranid lists were. So overall, with this list, it's something maybe we can talk about on another podcast, but I'm really enjoying molding and evolving this list. And a lot of the decisions I'm making to build it and how I play it, etc., are actually being made based on some of the content people in the team are producing. So Tom's list styles list, for example, talking about pressure lists, tried to kind of build it around that a little bit. And it's decisions like it's content like that, Tom, that helped me go 1-2. So thank you very much.
I was going to say, how many videos am I going to have to do that have a Hierophant Biotitan in them before you take one? Just going to see how much effort I need to put in to convince you to take one.
Dude, I don't think I can carry one. Never mind play one.
I've got one. You can have it. More than welcome. Take it to an event. Well, you can't have it permanently.
What if he goes undefeated with the Hierophant? That feels like a safe bet.
Do I wager the whole Hierophant that you can go 5-0 at GT?
I don't think Lewis is gaining anything if I don't, right?
Your firstborn, your eternal soul, something.
Yeah, that's me. That's me, guys. That was my weekend overall. Really happy. Went 3-3 for the weekend, so that's pretty cool.
Solid. Solid.
But,
bang average.
That's bang average, and that is what we are here at 6++.
To be fair, it's above average for Tyranids.
Oh, it definitely is. Yeah.
There was that 45% win rate for the season so far, I think it was.
On the Tyranids front, I should give a shout out to my friend Joel, who's been painting and collecting Tyranids as his first army for the last year and a half, and finally got them out to his first event this weekend at the Southampton GT.
Oh no!
Where he went 1-4, which I think actually for his first showing, very good. So well done, Joel.
A year and a half.
Sorry that you missed. You literally missed a year and a half of Nids being absolutely.
They were so good for so long.
I know. I know.
For so long.
His little hands could only paint so fast, and in the end, he didn't quite make it in time. But I think Joel's the kind of person who's happier playing something that isn't busted anyway. So,
hey guys,
he was having an
I've got some zone tropes. They're good, right?
Dude, the amount of people you speak to, and you're like, "Have you ever played Nids before?" And they're like, "Not in 9th," and I'm like, "Wow, have you picked a good time to play them now?"
Yeah.
Remember when you heard all the things about them? Forget everything.
Yeah, it's not the same prospect that it was, but hopefully new things around the corner for them anyway. I was also at an event. I was at Southampton GT. We had a couple of people down there. We had John Scrivens as well, and friend of the show, Sean Kate, where we all went down together. And Southampton GT is another UK TC one, so you know the standard of the terrain and the missions. What I would say was that in terms of space, it wasn't a classic. There wasn't enough board space to have stuff actually out on the sides around. It was one of those ones where it was a little bit tight for space, unfortunately. Parking was great. TOs were absolutely brilliant. There's some lovely TOs in that in that team that are regularly doing stuff now, and that, you know, they're really, really good value and take really good care of us all. But the actual space on the board was a little bit light for the UKTC one, so that's the only whinge I would have. But luckily, I wasn't playing Gene Stealer Cult, so I wasn't hiding my entire army under the table and then going, "Well, you'll find out in a minute what's in it." I was back on Drakari with some Harlequins souped in, which I've been really enjoying. Really fun list, and I've got it back out because I've missed playing it, but also because there's loads of Marines around. I was like, I like killing Marines with Drakari. It's a good time. And I did that for 3 games. I tabled 50 Deathwing Terminators round 1, which was fun. But it was a very new player, and they didn't take the ones with the Storm Shield, so it's not actually as good an achievement as it sounds initially. They're definitely a lot easier to kill. And then played Emperor's Spears. Never played Emperor's Spears before.
What's that thing?
Ultramarine successors, but like combat Ultramarines is how I would describe it. Deceptively good. And
there's rules for them, right?
Yeah, they got a White Dwarf supplement.
There's like a 1-page rule.
Chapters.
Yeah, so they get +1 advance and charge a la Blood Angels, and they get exploding 6s in combat, and they can turn on full rerolls to hit and +1 to wound with strats and stuff, and they got some cool relics. Very good, actually. Coupled in with the redeploy bits and bobs that Ultramarines have, that on combat stuff is no joke. I thought I was very impressed with them. And this lad Sam hadn't played tons lately, so that was the main difference there. And then I played Alpha Legion, which is deceptively scary because they can switch your objectives off. And this guy was trying to switch my objectives off for 3 turns, but he couldn't roll a 4 up to save his life, unfortunately. So my objectives very much stayed switched on. And at one point, he'd got through. And he had like a couple of Raptors had survived, and they were going to successfully switch the objective off. But then the Shadow Seer intervened and bonked them with her stick, and that was the end. And that was the end of that. So that was good. Yeah, good game. And then 2 much harder games the next day, into a very good Dark Angels list piloted by Louis on Tide of Conviction. Super, super close game. I had to go all the way around the edges of him and just be like, well, where are you going then? I suspect you want to roll down the middle, but I'll be in behind. And I'd taken Assassinate, killed all the characters except Ezekiel in the end, but lost on the end game swing, Tide of Conviction. As Ed will know, that's a real a real bastard to stop that from happening. And Louis played it very well. For the first 3 turns, we just didn't attack each other, really. Everything was just shuffling and moving and trying to stay. He had this big ball of Termies with all his characters wrap up and just moving it down. All my stuff's just hiding around the edges of the board. Tio was very confused, looking at us like, this all looks very serious. And then everything died, and then he just about snuck it at the end. And then I played Nicholas Willingale of Mind Goblin in his GSC. Now, Nicholas is a very, very good GSC player, and I was not optimistic about this game, and I was right. I got absolutely rolled by bikes and neophytes and all the things that I've been rolling people with, so that's just punishment, I think. But Nicholas was an absolute delight to play. And I think in this game I did a classic stupid thing, which is I deployed hoping I'd go first. Don't do that.
It's Davey thing, isn't it?
I know, but in this one I felt like I had to, and actually with hindsight I didn't. I could, if I deployed the Harlequins optimistically and not the Venoms, then if I had gone second I could just phantasm the Harlequins back and out of the way. I'd done it the other way around, so the Venoms were out, couldn't get them out of harm's way, so the bikes came and popped all the Venoms turn 1, and then there were some very funny moments. One Atlan Jackal biker survived Drazar killing the rest of the squad, and then killed Drazar with a demo charge, which was pretty funny.
Threw it at him.
Yeah, I was like, it's not going to be my day, but we had fun with it. And yeah, obviously Nicholas is an excellent player, so well done to him. So yeah, that was 3-2, and I think with Drakari at the minute, I was chatting with like Julio and Paulie who were at the event, and they both 3-2'd as well, and that kind of feels like they're in a sort of 3-2, and if you're lucky, a 4-1 kind of spot at these kind of big events at the moment. But they certainly have game into a good chunk of the meta. But I just think that top set give them the run around right now and shoot them to bits. But I do like on these new missions with the slightly changed angles. I think the UKTC board suits Venoms and Starweaves and stuff a little better than it did. There's more little niches you can hide in, which is quite fun.
I think fundamentally they still move very well. They still hold objectives well. Their secondaries are okay, and they can be decently killy when they need to be. Exactly that. Yeah, you still trade amazingly well, and against anything that can't hit you on its terms, it still feels incredibly strong. And yeah, so honest marine type armies really, really don't like them still. Yeah, it's very good. Loads of fun to play. And Harley's plug-in like a dream. Not having to spend CP to do that is just so good. It's so nice to have a few little squads of those. Sweet. Right. We'll move on to our main event. We're going to talk about how to be good opponents because we're all just so good.
we're just such good opponents. We're all so nice. Everyone always speaks so highly of us all the time. So we're going to tell you, the listener, how you too could be a good opponent, using some stories from the many games what we've done, gone and played. So we're going to order this in before the game, during the game, and after the game. But if general things of themes, talking points come up, we'll work around and see what people think of them. Okay.
Ed can just talk about all of them at once.
Yeah, Ed will do whatever the hell he likes. That's fine. Ed's the wild card. Ed does. He's made that very clear. He shaved his head. Right? You know what you're getting. Like, yeah.
I've got the breaks. Wild card.
Yeah, wild card. Ed's the bad boy of the game. That's the angle he's working now.
He's got the haircut.
I do look like I commit crimes.
Yeah. And so with Ed, we will start. With Ed, we will start. Get the wild card out good and early. So Ed, before the game, if you're being
before
a good opponent, before the game, Ed, what kind of things could you, as an opponent, do to be a good opponent before the game has even begun?
Well, I like to start off by putting thumbtacks on my opponent's chair. You want to make sure that they're no. So before the game, the thing that I do, and I find the most important, is to go through your list top down and just tell them all the things that you can do that you think are going to catch them out. I've had games where people have said, "Oh no, I know your army inside out," and then you get 30 minutes in and they go, What do you mean you can do that? And they're sat on their phone and they're checking. It's like, mate, you told me that you can play the army. Yeah. Even if someone says, no, I know them well, and be like, okay, let me just walk you through the relics and the wall of traits, and don't forget this strat, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I think that's massive. I think you usually know what the sort of key things in your list are that are going to be an issue, right? And I think explaining them at the start of the game is definitely a really nice thing to do.
But how often do you forget? Like, even at the height of Custodes play, I forgot that Custodes could heroically intervene for a CP. And then your opponent goes, you probably don't want to be there, I can heroically intervene. And we're like, yes, I have played 10 games into Custodes in the last 2 months. Thank you. And then just shuffle back a little bit.
Yeah. And that's saying we can talk about it, but I think that there's certain things where it's, and this is where it varies a bit person to person, but reiterating can also be, very positive and very nice. If you want to play the game in a way that's not causing sort of bad feelings or catching people out, I think that's a nice way to go. Chris, what sorts of things do you like to do before the game to be a good person?
Well, I think kind of you touched on it. It's a really interesting dynamic because there are no hard and fast rules on how to conduct yourself in the game. It's kind of entirely up to you. Do you want to allow takebacks? Do you want to remind them to not move within 3 inches and that sort of thing? Like for the heroics, you get to make that choice as a player every time you go. You get to make the choice of, are you going to be consistent even if your opponent's being a bit of a dick? Are you going to stick to your processes, or are you going to actually go, you know what, I'm going to change my habits to match the game? You get to make all those choices all the time. I would say perhaps what you want to be doing is just being consistent though. There's nothing worse than allowing takebacks and then, this game's very close, all of a sudden no takebacks, or changing the tone. So I think, just to preface everything, what we're going to say is you can choose how to conduct yourself in the game. You can make those decisions. There's no, if you go, you know what, I'm never going to allow any takebacks. What happens. I want you to follow the rules exactly, and you make that intent clear, and you're consistent with that, and you expect the same back. That is absolutely fine. Don't be a dick about it, but that is absolutely fine. And if you want to be take back whatever you like, go back to that phase if you want, then that's great too. Just be consistent. And I think for me, having played so many tournaments now, the most important thing is to have that conversation with your opponent beforehand, because everyone does play it differently. So I do like to say that, how do you like to go about things in terms of intent and takebacks and that? What's your thing? So I had a game a while ago, and I'd kind of been warned that this opponent might be a bit hard work. So I went out of my way to be like, look, before we play, how do you do that? And then we had a conversation about it. And then you stick to those rules that you've outlined. And it's about that being consistent. So I just think having, explaining the intent and how you want to, because also it means you're immediately having that positive affirmation with your opponent. And so it just gives you that thing. And then the final thing I would add, to touch on Ed's point, is it kind of explaining the jank. For example, at the teams event, I played, a lovely guy with his knights list, and he was telling me about all the different like knights things do. And I'm never going to remember that. It's going to go completely over my head. I mean, I remember when Admech first came out and I played into Sisters, and he was like, Celestine's got 6-inch heroic. And I'm like, right, yeah, that's really important. First turn, what did I do? Move my plane next to Celestine, who heroicked and killed my plane. Like, you just forget all of this stuff. We know that we forget all that stuff when it's told to us, right? So therefore, when we're telling them that stuff, they're not going to remember it either. When I play my opponents with Admech and I go, by the way, I could do this, and this, like, that's not going to gain anything.
No.
In fact, I guess you could almost consider it's probably deliberately confusing them, because you can go, I was going to tell you all of my rules. They won't register it. And then actually, I can then go, surprise, I can go 6 inches. So actually, in some ways, it's almost like good spirit to be like, look, these are the key things. So with my Harlequins, it was, look, I can move really far. I'll always make sure that's clear. With my light, I can move away. Okay? And I would just tell them like the really clear, simple things. I am one of those players who will go, you can, by the way, this can heroic 6, or I could heroic hair. Do you want to allow that? I know some people don't. Some people are like, oh, you've moved within 3. Cool, I'm heroicing. And I think that's a decision you get to make as an individual. But yeah, in terms of explaining, just try not to, just tell them the janky stuff, and the key points that you think are there. Don't overload them with information, because actually they'll just forget, and then it creates that
completely.
When you then heroic 6 and they're like, oh man, I guess you did say, didn't you? And it's like, and you just create those slight moments where you're like, it doesn't feel like a really. But I think, again, as I'll keep saying, you make that decision yourself as a player.
You do.
And how do you want to conduct yourself in the game? And there really isn't a right or a wrong.
Yeah, no, I think that first point about establishing expectations, I think, is absolutely massive, because if you have those conversations early on in the game and you know what sort of tone you're going to have, right, sort of, and that can be where communicating things about sort of experience or level, etc., can be useful as well. I think we've talked about this with events with Lewis before, where it's like if you're a brand new player and you're very new and you don't know what's going on, etc., making those kinds of things known is quite useful, and setting the tone for the game, I think, is very helpful. And as you say, this is an interesting one, because tones of games can change. I had a game, the tone of which changed just this weekend, and so it has been a while since I experienced that. But actually, I think consistency is probably the thing that makes for positive games above all else, right? As long as there's consistent mood and tone and approach is set and adhered to, whatever the outcome, I think that's fair. And I think it's when the sort of the niceties around the game turn out to be more optional, or more of a politeness that are only really there for certain types of game state, for example, then that doesn't really do them. That means they're not really very genuine and a little bit hollow. But we'll come back to that. How about you, Lewis? What do you do before a game?
Yeah, I think what you've mentioned there, all of this comes down to good communication, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And it's a very project managery term, but communication is the most important thing, isn't it? Positive communication up front. I was actually going to take it a little bit further back to start with, in that there's a few things that you can do even before the event that will help you when you come up to your opponent. So I think one of the first things, and this is coming from me as a TO, is that you make sure your army list is properly formatted on Battlescribe or the Warhammer 40K app or whatever it is.
Yes.
When you write your list and you copy it in, sometimes when you copy it, it all goes weird and you just get like pages and pages of text, or you leave all the rules in, for example. Exactly. So it's always good just to double check that when you put it into BCP, does it actually read okay? As a TO, when I'm trying to check lists, because I will, for all of my events, I will check a selection of the lists, which involves manually writing that list out and making sure that it all makes sense, getting the books out and make sure it all works. If I have to try and read through 100 pages of rules to try and work out where each unit is in the list, it's an absolute nightmare. And then your opponent, who's got 10-15 minutes before the game to actually look at this sort of stuff, is just not going to have a chance to work out what's in your army. So that is something that you can really, really easily do just to make that first kind of interaction much more straightforward. And on the same vein, when you're preparing your army, when you're putting your models together, making sure that your army is properly WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. Everything's properly put together and clearly represented. Trying to kind of do stuff quickly to get the most competitive thing on the table isn't necessarily going to help your opponent have the best experience. Looking at all those Harlequin players who didn't put any pilots in their boats and things like that, it's like
Fuck 'em.
But just making sure so that when you go up to someone looks at your army, they can see, oh right, that's the guy with the heavy bolter and that's the guy with this. If it's all just kind of mishmash of models because you've just gone, oh, these multi-metals are now the best thing, this is all clearly multi-metals, all that sort of stuff. Prepping that in advance, putting some time and effort into your army to make sure that it looks like it's supposed to, I think goes a long way to making it clear. And then to kind of bring all that together, something that I like to try and do when I first look at my opponent's army. I'm not very good at reading a list and deciding what is and isn't good. I kind of have to visualize it, I have to see it, and I have to look at their army, which means I have to look at their models quite closely to work out what they're all doing. So what I like to do is, and it's a good icebreaker at the start of an interaction, is to actually look at their models and find something in that army that you really like. Cool conversion, really nice paint job, a group of units that you don't normally see, things like that, and actually draw that out and highlight that to your opponent. I think it shows that you've taken interest in their army.
Yeah.
I think everyone likes to hear that their army looks really cool, or the conversion they spent 12 hours putting together looks really amazing.
Yeah.
And I think you can break some ice and you can give your opponent a little bit of a buzz going into the game by kind of complimenting on the hobby side. Because even if the army doesn't look amazing, there will be something in there that they've put a load of time into, or put a load of effort or love into. And if you find it and draw it out, I think it makes people's day.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's a really important dimension of this, right? Which is that for lots of people, it's a creative exercise.
Yeah,
and it's
wider hobby
appreciating
around the game,
that, right? And again, like unusual lists again. So I had this with the Emperor's Spears chat, right? His Emperor's Spears army in their scheme, utterly beautiful. Also, a really cool list, and like low key, very strong list as well. Like when I first read down it was like, this honestly looks like someone's painted up Imperium magazine. It's got like one of them. It's got like one of everything. But I was looking over it a couple times, like, oh, but it all fits together. Everything's got a job here. Like it's all going to work really nicely. And that was exactly how it turned out. And that that appreciation I think is really important. And it's remembering and playing up to all of those aspects of the game that aren't just the result, I think is really good, because that's what I'd say the vast majority of players are at events for in many ways. They like winning games, but all that stuff is really important to them as well. So yeah, no, really, really nice. How about you, Davey?
So I've got like 3 things that I'll be really rapid with because everyone said all the big ones. One of them is just to follow on from Lewis's point there. Like you can obviously ask questions about stuff you're interested in. But don't be afraid to be a little bit more direct, right? Because we're all playing a game, like, we all know heroic interventions, all this, that, and the other, right? Ask really open questions to your opponent that will help them explain what their army does. How do you win games? How does your list win games? How does your army work? Let them explain it to you. And if they say, well, I use this stratagem and this stratagem, like for me, I use my Hormigans auto advance and then charge you. Oh, and that's a stratagem? Yes. And then you automatically know, like, that's the key things that we're going to be doing. Second one, and I think this is a little bit more broad, right? But it's super important because I felt this recently. You're about to spend 3 hours with someone. The first minute can dictate how the entire 3 hours will go. Don't be a dick. Be positive. Turn up to the table without a fucking attitude problem. Or try not to cough in your hand and then shake someone's hand. Do you know what I mean? Like, come on. Like, it's just like, be nice and roll dice, I think is how the War Mistress shouts it. And I think that's really, really cool. Absolutely. For the first minute that you meet someone, you should just be totally, like, really up for this and be like, right, we're going to have a great game. And, that's how I try and do it because I'm always excited to meet new people, even people I've already played already. It's like, oh, man, like that last game. And, just start on a positive, super happy note. And then the rest of the 3 hours, because if you don't, you're relying on 2 hours and 59 minutes of trying to drag it up to being a positive experience. Whereas if you start on a high, you'll end on a high most likely. 100%. And then the last thing that I like to do is to let my opponent get used to the terrain by letting them set it all up.
I was just wanting to call you out for that last point when you said the first minute of the setup is dictates the game. We played at an event quite recently, and you turned up basically at the time, not late technically, but I had set the terrain up. And then your first interaction was you gave me attitude because I'd bribed the TO to take some terrain off, and I just thought that was bang out of order.
Yeah, I can only apologise for that.
He did take a bribe to put it back on the table, to be fair. So no harm, no foul.
That TO was massively won out of that interaction.
Yeah.
Ashley dug me out about my commentary about his event. I remember I said his event was amazing, it was brilliant.
Hey, last
table had a little bit light on terrain. First thing he said to me when I saw him on Saturday, "You just heard you were slagging off my terrain." Ashley, I said your event was amazing, mate. Come on.
Ashley, he's a big fan of your terrain. He just wishes there was more of it.
Yeah, exactly. I love it so much, Ashley. I want more of it.
Yeah, exactly that. No, very nice. I think that's really important. I think positivity and being friendly. There's two things I think that relate to that I was thinking of that I know I'm bad with, or one I'm definitely bad with, and the other one I work very hard to manage. When we're at events these days, we are there as part of teams. We've got big communities that we're part of, and actually we're often talking to that team the whole time via like communications media, right? So you're in WhatsApp, you're talking to your team. There is actually a very real risk these days that you're more in a conversation with your team than you are with the player you're playing at points, because there's positives to that. You're getting help, you're getting advice, you're reporting on the game state, etc. But it's very, as someone who's sucked into his phone far too much, you've got to be careful not to be too much with your team, too much in the digital space, and not enough actually just chatting to and talking to this human being, right? There are there'll be a couple of appropriate moments in a game in which you can probably take a bit of time to text, get advice, whatever, but you don't want to overdo that, and you certainly don't want to start there, right? So if you're having any debrief about the opponent with your team and stuff, get that good and done before you go and meet them and start setting up and everything else. That's just a very modern problem, and I am a massive addict of all kinds. So this is me just telling myself to be better with this going forwards.
I think that's an interesting point, actually. Tom. Is it appropriate to be getting advice during the game?
That's really
I think from my perspective, if I can say that when obviously I've only been in the 6++ team a few weeks, but when I have seen you posting things that have been going on, I've tried to steer away from anything kind of constructive and just give you a bit of G'ing up. I don't know whether if I was playing you, Tom, I don't think I'd be comfortable with you messaging others or feeling like you were getting advice. I think that
100%.
That would put me off.
No, completely. I say it's not something where I don't think I'd seek advice actively during a game. I think we like to check in and we report on how it's going and share photos and those kinds of things. But before games, if it's like an army you haven't played, for example, I think we'll check in. As you say, God, imagine trying to get like plays advice mid-game.
It doesn't work.
There's no way that would work. No one can know your games. I would totally agree, though. I think that would feel uncomfortable. That would feel odd.
Take photos of them going along, and then phone goes away.
Yeah, exactly those. And then the second one, and I think this is an important one, 40k is at times an imbalanced game, but also a rock, paper, scissors game, right? So we go into games and we often have a very clear sense of how a particular matchup is going to go. Do not make that a big deal or part of the opening conversations. You talk about the matchup and what it's like after that game is done. That is when you reflect on the matchup. You can reflect on it together sympathetically because it's probably played out more or less as you both thought it would, but you do not make a fuss about it at the start because it doesn't always go that way. And you do not want to bring the psychology of how this is supposed to go, who's up, who's down, who's in the good spot, who's in the bad spot, blah, 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 into that interaction at the start, because it's a recipe for negativity. It's a recipe for either stress or overconfidence sometimes as well. All sorts of things which I don't think are helpful in terms of playing an interesting and competitive game. And it can be really unpleasant as well. You know, if someone's sort of kicking and screaming and moping about the game, then that can be really unpleasant. So try not to do that. There will be a time to reflect on the matchup. It's not before the game itself has happened, I don't think.
I've had that experience a lot with Harlequins, and I've spoken about it with you guys before. Multiple games where they come up and go, "Oh, Harlequins, man, no, I can't win this game," and immediately that's like, right, okay, so I'm expected to win now. Okay. Yeah. So if I lose, you're just saying I'm a really bad player. There's no way to win.
I mean, they've played you, so they're new.
Yeah. that negativity just kind of sets it frustrates me so much. I've had it a lot, and it's really frustrating. So much so that at the teams event, when I played into Custodes, the 2 weeks previously I played it, I knew exactly what was going to happen. I was going to get 20 0'd.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just like, yeah, I'm really excited for this game. Just going to have a good time. And I went first and I was like, oh, what do I do here? And he went, yeah, I'm not going to lie, mate. It's pretty much a 20-0 to me. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, we can talk about that now then. So that's fine. That's open the door. And I can say, yeah, I know because I've seen how this game goes before. Yeah. And that's fine.
Yeah, and in that instance, he's being. I think, I don't know if I was the opponent and I was in the position thinking that was going to be 20. I don't think I'd be bringing that out that early in the game.
No, yeah, it's very
certainly
confident.
it does it frees you up to be you. In that sense, you've been invited to be sort of reflecting on the difficulty of the position you're in, right? Which is very different to sort of bringing that in and working that in unsolicited.
Yeah,
but I think there's something here, right? Because I don't advocate to do it at all, but I'm definitely guilty of doing it in the past. But I would say that is there something around people managing their own expectations in their heads and almost, and again, not the right thing to do, but are they doing it just so they can say to themselves, well, this one doesn't matter, I can take this one on the chin. So, because if they don't say it and they give themselves a chance, they'll only be disappointed if or when they lose.
I guess I'd make the distinction between what your take on this is in your own head and how you are instrumentalizing your opinion of it with the opponent. I think those are different things. Yeah. I think I've gone into plenty of games where I'm very certain I'm going to lose. But there's a very real difference between arriving at that conclusion and being at peace with it in your own head and saying at the start, "Oh, I'm going to lose this," etc., etc., etc. You see what I mean?
Totally.
That's the thing. I think that's the risk with it, and I've seen it weaponized. I've seen people weaponize that kind of matchup negativity or matchup pessimism before.
I guess I'm just trying to think of any way someone would have any reason why anyone would do it without, trying to weaponize it. But I guess I don't know. It's not helpful to anyone.
No. But I think it's also just part and parcel of the game, doesn't it? And it's ebb and flow with strength and things. And I think it's, as I say, I don't think that talking about it is a bad thing. I just don't think it's for the start of the game. I don't think that's where you carry that, because actually the other thing about 40k, that's one thing about 40k, it's very imbalanced at times and it has rock paper scissors. The other thing is that good players still absolutely destroy bad ones, and that's going to happen irrespective of matchup. And you don't know yet at the start of a game, you don't know whether player skill is going to do that thing it sometimes does and have ride right over what a matchup is supposed to go like anyway. And so I think that's the thing. There's often other unknowns at that stage, and it's sort of working out what the game actually looks like before reflecting on it, I guess. But as Chris said, there is no right way to do this. It's just that's one where I've seen people feeling bad about it. And as I say, Chris with his Harlequins has definitely had to deal with that at different times. I don't think you'd have to deal with it now, Chris. Take your Harlequins out. You won't have people worrying.
I can now go and be like, oh yeah, I'm playing Admech, mate. So obviously I haven't got much chance.
Annihilate them.
Lovely to be in the underdog spot, right? It's great. It's a good time. Okay, so we'll move to thinking about during the game. I'm going to throw it back to Davey, because Davey had to go after everyone else had said a bunch of stuff. So Davey, during the game, how do you be a good opponent? What kinds of things can you do?
So enjoy yourself, obviously. Have that consistency of attitude that we spoke about before. Discuss the game. How do you think this is going? Treat it like it. And here we go, guys. Are you ready for a cheesy phrase? It's collaboration rather than confrontation.
Mm-hmm. Not as good as be nice and roll dice, but also it's still a good saying.
So that's what, Yeah, it's definitely not as catchy. And you might think, well, yeah, that's easy to say when you're not playing a competitive game, or you're in the fight, you're in the top 8 or whatever. But look at Mike Porter and the lad from Out of War. That name has slipped my brain.
Jack
Harpster. They had a really collaborative game, and it was in the semi-finals of the biggest tournament in the world. So there's that. But I do have a question for you as well, actually, guys. So, as we were talking about before, what are the key stratagems you use, etc.? I've got a stratagem that I sometimes get out that it's very circumstantial. Essentially, I'll be very quick because it's an example. Paravors, whenever they suffer a wound on a 4-up, you can take a mortal. Right? Whenever they suffer a wound in melee. On a 4-up, you can take a mortal. They've got 15 wounds, right? So on average, if someone's going to wipe the unit,
that's sweet.
7.5 mortals, right?
Yeah, Draz melts. Love it.
You can't tell them that at the start of the game because it's not important enough it's a very niche scenario,
I
right?
disagree. I think you can tell them if that's a big thing.
But if I'm telling them that one, Chris, I've got to tell them 10 stratagems.
But when you're running through,
it's not in the top 10 that
unit,
I use.
When you're going through each unit and you're like, these are powerfuls, they're obviously flamers. By the way, when you charge them,
I think his point is more it's a strat that you use like 1 in 10, 1 in 15 games. It's like such a niche strat that it's fantastic when it comes up, but you don't typically use it. And then someone charges you, go, oh, hold on a second.
And I found myself in this situation quite a few times where I go, oh shit, this is something I could do. Or it's like Hive Tyrant Fight on Death. It's like, oh yeah, that is a 2CP strat that would absolutely work right now. And you know, it's how do you do those extra strats?
I think you need to have an expectation as an opponent that you have an understanding of your opponent's army as well. They can't sit and explain 4 pages of stratagems to you. I think, David, what you say at the start is that the key ones, as you say, the ones you're going to use all the time that are important to making your army function. Situational ones, you'd be there for 4 hours going through every particular potential combination. So when you are at a competitive event, if you don't know your opponent's army very well, unfortunately, there are probably going to be times where they do something you didn't know that they could do. There's a distinction there between a feels bad moment, you being caught out with something because someone's done a dirty on you, or someone's just used a thing in their army that they can do that's quite strong in various particular circumstances. So I think it's something you do have to manage quite carefully, especially if you're against newer players and things like that. But if someone knows what they're doing and is trying to play at a good level, there is, I think, an expectation that you do learn the other armies that you could potentially be playing into. Yeah. So a very difficult balance, though.
It is a very difficult balance. Yeah.
Depends on their impact of the strat, I guess. Like if it's, by the way, so for example, AdMech, I can use a character to do D3 mortals to a vehicle. That hardly ever comes up. I guess Pyrovores, if they've got if you charge them at full strength and those Pyrovores can do on average 7-8 mortal wounds, that's actually quite a powerful stratagem. Obviously, I assume they just get shot away or are nearly dead, so you never.
Well, it's it's 2CP as well, right? So it's not one that you do lightly at all.
The thing about it is that's a classic. I think the stratagems are a particularly interesting one with this because the thing with stratagems is that they are useful. Almost always useful, even if you tell your opponent about them, because so take that example, your opponent isn't going to attack your Pyrovores in melee. You benefit if they don't want to do that with certain things, right? That's a positive. So if you tell them that you can do that, you're still gaining, because if the decision they end up taking is not to attack them in combat, that's a positive for you because you've got Pyrovores for that, right? But I guess it depends when that information is conveyed.
This is the thing, right? This is the thing. Like you don't know how useful it's going to be. Say I charge them in. Well, there's nothing they could have done about it. But like, okay, it's just one of those ones you don't necessarily realize you can do it until it's the moment. Because it doesn't come to the top of my mind.
I had a very clear moment of that when I used to play the AdMech. I just started using the horses. For those of you who don't know, the horses have a 2CP strat. So when they're charged, you can move them away.
People love stuff that moves away when you charge it, by the way. That's their favourite thing in Warhammer. God, people just love it. They love being run away from or not making their charges.
Yeah.
God, they love it so much.
Yeah. So I'm playing Grey Knights, and he's moved his interceptors up off the objective and declares a charge onto the horses. And I suddenly I can move these horses. And he's like, oh, well, my movement could have got me onto the objective. I was just like, I'll just charge onto it. So I'm then like, oh man, this is awkward, because that is a really important strat to know. I would I'd make sure everyone. So my solution was I just said, well, if you had the movement, feel free to move on to the objective and then just declare the charge. And I felt that was a halfway. That was a completely fair way of deciding it. And he went, no, it's fun. I just won't make the charge.
And that's him choosing to play that game, right? Yeah.
At the end, he was then a bit like, yeah, I mean, that gotcha, or there's some gotchas in that list, those horses, that's a good gotcha. And I was like thinking about it, because the way he said it, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it kind of felt a bit like he was saying I should have told him. Yeah. And I was like, well, firstly, I have made it explicitly clear that I forgot. And secondly, I did give you the entire opportunity.
You did nothing wrong in that situation.
No, you didn't.
And I would probably have taken the same decision as him and not declared the charge and just gone, that's my mistake, I should have known.
Yeah, and then you learn.
Especially with that one, that was a pretty well publicised strat. when those units came out, when that book came
it
out,
was
that
on
was
the
something that was
community
pretty
page.
obvious that they could do. So, for me, I try and hold myself to a standard where if I don't know something and someone uses a strat, it's like, yeah, fine, whatever.
And
I didn't know it existed. Fine, carry on.
One of my favourite questions is, well, would you do anything differently then? Like, if it's like any sort of situations like that, would you change what you would have done? And then that's fine by me. I'm happy for you to kind of change the process.
Tricky though when you get to that point. So when you get to a charge phase, for Grey Knight players, you already had a psychic phase, you already had a shooting phase. Game state's probably very different to what it was at the start of his movement phase. So he now has a lot more information to make that decision, which is why I think he made the correct decision in saying, "Yep, held my hands up, didn't know about that strat." Mistakes
This
mine
is like
as the Grey Knight player.
The team tournament Incarn situation where he was like, there was a moment where he was like thinking about teleporting his Incarn into a dead unit, and then he was like, no. And then I did some more shooting, and he went, oh, actually, do you mind if I move my Incarn to where that unit died previous, like 3-4 shooting?
And
I'm like,
I remember you saying,
no.
Yes, I mind very much.
Completely different situation now. And that's one of the very, very few times I've ever said no.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was fully justified in saying no there.
100%.
But like when I played Vic, he had moved. He did a cast and then quickened his middle caster like back to near his deployment zone, put it behind a ruin, and then he was doing some other stuff. Where I started my turn, he was like, "Oh, actually, rather than putting it here, do you mind if I just put it behind this ruin?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not getting to that thing anyway. It really makes no difference. It's a difference if he suddenly goes, oh, I've left it out in the open and he's going to be able to get to it. And that's a bit where you have to... I know Vic's a very high-quality player. I know he wouldn't try and do me wrong. Obviously, if Vic had left the guy out wide open and suddenly spotted an angle as I started to move my troops towards that place, I'd be like, well, actually, my game plan's now predicated on that and you might have changed things. You do have to just go with your judgment.
Yeah,
I think sometimes.
Yeah.
For me, it feels like game state. Like if it's something like, oh, I was obviously going to raise a banner here. Do you mind if I do it?
Oh yeah,
like something like that, or just I've even let people do warp ritual or something like that. They've walked up, they've done a cast in the middle, and gone, I'm positioned to do warp ritual.
Yeah.
It's like,
that's
yeah,
a
of course,
classic.
mate. Just go ahead. Like, we've all done the same thing. But then
salvage.
Yeah, data sky salvage.
Yeah, but then when you
take
get
the back objective and save them the bother, that's the thing.
Yeah. But then when you get to stuff like you've done it in the psychic phase and it's now the charge phase and you've used the onslaught to advance and charge, like, oh, I should have ordered that correctly. It's like, well, it's a bit late for that now.
Yeah, there's some sequencing that you just can't untangle, right? But when there are basically inconsequential fixes that are very easily, you can see the intent very easily. I think being generous and being collaborative with that, but again being consistent and both having that spirit and maintaining that spirit is good. And again, this isn't a right way, is it? And again, you're making choices. I feel like I've always found the sort of the phenomenon of the gotcha very interesting because in my experience, you don't hear much about gotcha moments from good players. In all honesty, it's not a term good players ever use because good players know they live and die by how well they understand the game, and they don't expect anything else. And some players that are more casual, more relaxed, will use the gotcha as a way of vilifying players using stuff they didn't understand or know. But
on that
communicating around it is still very important, right?
Yeah. On that point, I will say though, the further up the tables you go, I find generally there are some exceptions. People are more open about what they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and the gotcha angle is more sort of like, oh, by the way, obviously I know you intend to not be in range for me to heroically intervene, because they know that you're just playing quickly. Games tend to be played with intent the further up the tables you go. So I guess that might factor into it as well.
No, absolutely, and I do think that is the case, and you do get where people, if you're dealing with a bad actor, and sometimes you are, right, then that absolutely, then you do get into a whole realm of people trying to pull stuff, etc. But I think that exact spirit that you're talking about, I think it's that trying to, I think certainly for myself and a lot of people I play, they want to win the game in a state of full knowledge. That's how they want to win. They want you to know what they can do, and they want to beat you anyway. That's how they want to win the game, right? That's the best kind of game. Is everyone knows and appreciates what the two armies are trying to do, can see it, can comment on it, can understand it, and then one person manages to utilize that better. They don't want to win because you didn't understand something or you made an error. And as you say, I wonder whether that sometimes that's a phenomenon that you get in other situations because people are feeling like they need to leverage that one way or the other, or hoping to leverage that, right?
When you're playing the same people every 3 or 4 weeks, you don't want to get a reputation for being that guy because then you've got to play them again.
You really don't. Lewis, what do you think? What you got for during the game?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think a bit more on communication, really. And I think this harks back to what Chris was saying about some armies like Imperial Knights and things like that, which have a lot of overlapping buffs and things like that. You can help your opponent and explain what your units are up to, explaining what buffs it's got, explaining how everything interacts as clearly as possible. So for me, I like to use tokens. So my knights, they have, obviously I've got in my current iteration of the knight list, there's 3 characters and then another knight that's got buffs on it as well, and then some of those knights give out buffs to others, and which means other knights get -1 damage, and some of them get rules and things like that, and there's warlord traits and relics, and some of the knights got 2 warlord traits, and so trying to explain that to someone, it's just a wall of text. Whereas if you've actually got tokens, or you've got some way of actually physically representing what's going on, it makes it so much easier for your opponent to see what's happening, which I think goes a long way to making it feel like you're being a good opponent, and being as open as honest of what's going on. And I think on a similar vein, it's just there's a few little things that you can do that are really straightforward, but if you don't do them, it can kind of taint your game slightly. So obvious ones, little things, as I said, only tiny things, but like making sure at the end of each player turn you've agreed to scoring. So you've taken 30 seconds just to go, right, I usually do it on paper. I've just got the ITC Battles app, so I might start doing it on my phone, but on paper it's like, right, I've got it written down that you've got a banner here and you've done this and done this and done this.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we agreed you have scored 5 points this turn, or whatever it is. Doing that every single turn, I think, just keeps that communication going and means that you get to the end of the game, you're both on the same page. Because you get some feel bad at the end if stuff's gone wrong.
That's hugely important.
And I think similar, I say little tiny stuff like keeping your dice rolls clear. So making it very obvious where you're rolling
into
your
the
dice.
ruin, mate. Into the ruin. Dig out in your deployment zone.
No, 100%.
Those little UKTC ones are perfect for just doing 20 dice.
What I find is no one rolls into terrain in UKTC, but what they do is they're inconsistent about whether they pick up a cocked dice or not, and that boils my piss. So at the start, like on the first cocked roll, I'll say, look, I always re-roll anything cocked. I don't care what you do as long as you're consistent.
I can literally remember that conversation with you.
Because it's rote and it just comes out the first time I do it. It normally, what will happen is I'll roll something and it'll be a fail, but it's cocked. And I'll go, right, I'm not going to re-roll that because I haven't said it, but I re-roll everything from this point on. Because it's just something I forget to do at the start of the game, and then I see a cocked dice and I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake.
I don't really mind that much. Like if it's very clear what the result on the dice is, I'm happy we just keep all of them. Yeah. But I appreciate that then does potentially cause trouble. Like how cocked do you have to get right before? So I think being consistent like that is probably the safest way to do it.
But no, 100%. And I hold my hands up to that. Actually, I remember a very good example. The guy that hopefully friends all the way through the game and all the way after, and still to this day. But it was in Gibraltar actually, when I was at one of the no retreat events, one of the ones I actually went on to win in the end. But I had an opportunity to get one of my Tau commanders to get all 4 fusion blasters into a big super heavy thing, and I rolled the damage dice behind a wall, and then we were towards the latter age of the tournament, so I was getting a bit excited, so I just picked the dice up straight away. Which he didn't see the results, and I got like, out of the 4d6 dice, I got like 15 damage or something. It was okay. The thing had like 24 wounds left. And then I realised I'd done it, and he said, I didn't see those results. I'm really, really sorry. Do you want me to re-roll? Because you didn't see them. And I think that's quite a thing to do.
Yeah.
Say, if someone didn't see the dice, and it worked out nicely in my favour. But actually what happened is I re-rolled all 4 of those dice and got 4 6s and did 24
I was about to say, I bet quadruple 6s with a lot.
Oh, no.
It literally destroyed this tank. It then exploded, and it was one of those tanks that does extra mortal wounds to psychic stuff around it, and he had a big psychic blob around it. So it killed. The tank was like 500 points, and it killed about 300 points of Chaos Marines around it. And I went on to win on the event. And he was like, I should have just kept that 15 damage and taken your word for it, shouldn't I? I was like, yep. But I mean, I think right. in that I made the mistake, and I rolled the dice, and he couldn't see them, and I picked the dice up, and I was like, shit, you didn't actually see what those results were. I've just told you it's 15 damage, and that could have been anything. Yeah. Luckily, he turned around, shook hands afterwards, and it was great, and he did laugh when I got all 4 6s afterwards. So I was like, I would say I'm not trying to cheat, I'm not trying to, but it happens, doesn't it? You get locked into the game, you get excited, but I think the important thing is to, if you do make a mistake, or you do something wrong, or do something that could come across negatively, that you hold your hands up to it and say, yep, no, screwed up. Do you want me to redo all that? Because I think that's the only fair way, and your opponent can make a decision then, can't they? Say,
yeah, exactly.
We roll the dice again, or you take my word for it. And if I'm honest and say, yeah, that was completely my fault. I made a mistake. I didn't make it clear what I was doing. I should have made it clear. There's no pressure on you to decide how you want to do it. If you're happy to trust me and keep the result, we keep it. Or if you want to say, actually, no, I would like to see what's going on, and I'll take the chances, then hopefully you can try and explain that in a way that doesn't put them under pressure, that they feel bad about having to make.
I was probably more confused at how a bolter did that much damage.
Ill fists, mate. That's what happens. Just one shot, one kill.
Oh, man. Have we been to you, Chris, yet? Have you got anything to add to that?
No, I've just been chipping in and being annoying.
Right. Yeah, no, Ed's already used his well up. His is gone, but
I would say it's communication. Obviously, I think pre-measuring is really important. Like when I am super focused and super in the game, super engaged, I'll be like, right, I'll be explaining my intent with every unit. All right, okay. So this unit moves 8. I'm advancing them. Cool. I've rolled 4, whatever. So I'm going to move 12. So that will be a 5-inch charge.
Yeah, get that dice down. Show it. Yeah.
That clear each time, setting up the situations. Like these guys are moving here, so they can see this unit and this unit. When I was playing Jamie the other day, I had this moment where I moved out some Iron Striders, touched terrain, and was thinking, right, these two can see the Dreadnought and the tank, and these two will shoot down that field. And then we came to shoot, and I was like, oh, should I shoot the Dreadnought and the tank? And Jamie looked down and was like, you can't see the Dreadnought, you can only see the tank. I was like, oh, I thought I could. And I looked, I was like, oh, no, you're right. And actually that, if I'd been saying at the time, I put these 2 models here, I want to be able to see both things, then that would have been a lot better than me just kind of locking that in. So I think that's the it's so hard, conversely, to do it consistently. I know when I'm super focused, I've got the adrenaline, I'm engaged, I'm like, right, I'm in this game. For me, where I'm more than happy to admit I can struggle is when maybe turn 2 or 3, I realise that I've lost. That's when the adrenaline starts to go. It's been a long weekend. You can sometimes just a bit disengage. I know there have definitely been times where I'll just sit there, and most of the time I make a really big effort to be really over the top positive and happy and have a great time. But I know I can sometimes. I'm never like rude or anything, but I will just like sit there and just be a bit quieter. And it's because it's a draining thing. So I know for me, I've got to make a big effort. Game 3 on the Saturday and game 5 on the Sunday.
Yeah, I had the exact same thing in my game.
When I'm winning, I need to try and it's not even happy or unhappy. It's just the kind of extroverted nature. And then the only other thing I would say is make a decision what you are as a person in terms of line of sight. So if I move out and and you can see like a ribbon or something, I'm like, do you want to just turn that model, mate?
Tuck that in.
Just tuck that in, because then, and I know that when opponents do it to me, that makes me feel really positive, and I really like that, because it means that we're going to have
that collaborative thing, isn't it? It's the helping each other out, because that's needless. That's almost always needless, those kinds of little angles.
It goes back to like the top players who are like, they know what the intent is. So have that perfect game of 40k. And I guess I'm more like that. So I'm more like, I'd much rather. I'm not supposed to be able to see that unit. If he pre-measured and be like, you move here, and and then they've got it wrong, then that might mean to be a conversation about like intent. But again, that's entirely up to you. But I think you just need to make that decision yourself, because I know it's very frustrating when I've had 10 rubric occult terminators blast into my 10-man because I've let ribbon show, and that could have been so easily avoided. And I know I should have been more careful with my movement as a counter, but at the same time,
maybe they should have terrain rules that don't let a ribbon get your whole unit annihilated. I don't know. Like they can.
Well, exactly that. So I think just make a decision on what you are, and again, be consistent about that. But those are my points.
Yeah, definitely. I think checking and agreeing game state regularly is one I wanted to just reiterate, because I had a first game in a long time where there were some issues around this at the weekend, and there were two things. People who play me, transports. I play a lot of armies with transports, a lot of armies where things pop out of the ground. So I work very hard to communicate all the time what is in reserves, what is in what transports, and I'm always reiterating this all of the time. That's something I do. A game I played at the weekend ended up being a lot closer than I think the person I was playing against expected that game to be, and the niceties which had been established at the start started to evaporate towards the end of said game, because I think my opponent was very worried that they were in fact going to lose to Drukhari, which wasn't something they wanted to do. And a couple of things, there were some hard edges around a couple of things, but one of the things was a raider in which I had told said opponent multiple times had 5 incubi in, and had a little incubi stood next to the raider all game. And then when he charged said raider, I'd said, I'm just going to move this incubi because you need to pile your terminators around, but there's incubi in this raider. And I popped the incubi over. So we talked about this, I think, 3 or 4 times. And then in my turn, when I went to get said incubi out, the opponent, for a moment, toyed with saying, I didn't think there were incubi in that raider. At which point, we had to have a conversation about this has been communicated very clearly multiple times. And it was sort of, I think it was one where I don't think the intention was to be sort of negative, but I think the opponent was sort of very tense about the game state. And on that case, I didn't feel like it was in good faith. I felt like I'd been working very hard to make sure that the opponent was aware of where these were, and that was being sort of played with a little bit. And then the other thing was scoring the primary, where this is, like Lewis has said, if you just agree very clearly, end of each turn, exactly game state, make sure that's written down on exactly the same page, that's great. In this game, opponent retroactively tried to give themselves full primary that they hadn't got. I'd zeroed them. And at the time, I let it slide because it became a you versus me, word situation, and it wasn't going to change the game in this instance. But then looking back through the photos of the game, some lovely photos of the game, I literally had a lovely photo of me zeroing his army. And I was like, oh, goodness, look, I did. Look, that's absolutely no primary for this round.
That's quite the jump.
Yeah.
No, I got full primary. No, you got 0.
Oh, yeah, no, so it wasn't the full. It was just a 4. It was just a 4.
Oh, 4.
And there was a moment towards the end of this game where that 4 could have been very important. In the end, it wasn't. There was a little bit of chip secondary got this opponent home either way. But there was just a couple of things there that reminded me why it's very important to keep reiterating those things, but also to do that in good faith, right? And I think you have to assume the best of your opponent, but you also have to be very clear and very firm with that as well. Great.
It's very easy when it feels like for you the stakes are high, or it feels like you're doing very well, or you want to perform. Yeah. It's very easy to slip into a mindset that is no longer positive.
Yes,
and it's really hard to keep yourself out of that. And I wouldn't say I was very good at that, but I think I can very much get into it. And if I think I'm doing well or game's really, really close, I'll do what Chris mentioned. I'll start going a bit quiet because I'll be thinking and I'll be looking at stuff. So it will potentially feel like I'm not being positive anymore, which isn't the case. It's just that it's like, I could win this game, especially when I'm playing things that aren't as competitive and I'm playing someone that has got something good. And I know, and I know there's a chance for me to win it. I will start thinking, I'll just go blank because I can't do one thing at a time. So I'll just stop talking and it'll be like, are you okay? It's like, yeah, absolutely fine. Just thinking a lot. Once I'm back in the room, I'll be very back to being positive again.
And I think communicating about your own personal condition can be helpful with that, right? I think that's very important. It's useful to do that. This is something I have, as Chris can attest because he's played me. I have a bit of a sort of anxiety tick, which is a cough. Very frustrating, very annoying thing. I get a sort of ghost cough out of nowhere. It's extremely irritating, and unfortunately for me, anxiety and excitement are basically on the same spectrum. So often when I'm playing 40k and competing, I'm having a great time, but I'm also very amped up, and that can sometimes manifest that way. It was really bad this weekend. It was really, really irritating. But I often have to explain that, no, don't worry, I'm not dying. I'm all right. I've just got this very
coughing away.
This super pandemic friendly cough. It was a great time to have that tick during the COVID era. So lots of fun. But yeah.
I think
communicating so everyone knows where you're at.
No, 100%. Something that's really helped me on that, and it was something I wasn't really a fan of them to start with, but I think it's definitely where chess clocks come in to their own. In that you can just say, especially for my knights, it's like if I want to take 20 minutes from movement phase because I think it's important, that time's on me.
Yeah.
I can just flick it over and go, right, settle in, because I'm going to stand here for 10 minutes and I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit here and look at the board. And it's going to be very boring for you, but I just need 10 minutes to think about what I'm doing, because this is really, really crucial for me. How I'm going to win this game or I'm going to lose it is going to hinge on this movement phase or this shooting phase. So if you don't have a clock, I'd start getting anxious because I feel like I'm wasting time, and my opponent will be looking at it going, he's just deliberately stood there not doing anything. Quite like
slow night players.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's very difficult for me to get slow play anyone because I've only got 6 models, but it can be done because I have spent 20-25 minutes on a movement phase before, I have measured everything out, and I've just gone, if I put him there, then I need to put him over there, and I need to put that over there, and this guy then needs to shoot over here, and this guy needs to charge over here, and this guy needs to do this action here, and they get on this objective. And then it's like, cool, well, that kind of works. How many points does that get me? Re-rack. Obviously, I haven't moved any models at this point. Re-rack, start again. But it's how you communicate that, isn't it? To or at least try not to make your opponent feel bad if you're on the clock.
Really good point, man. That is such a good point.
I was
never thought about that for night players, as Chris said.
One of the advantages of being a night player is that your turns don't actually take that long. So one of the huge things that you can do is take that amount of time to get your movement phase right, and it's critical for knights. If you get it wrong, you'll end up with a knight that can be seen but can't see anything, which is obviously a huge problem.
This is actually, I think that actually links to a wider point. I know you were talking about things you can do before the game. Play an army that you like playing and are going to have a nice time playing, I think is quite a sensible thing to do at events, because then your opponent, I think this is an interesting one, but I think that is a very good way to ensure a sort of positive state in the game, right? If it's not an ordeal for you, it won't be an ordeal for them. And so the lad I played round 1, right, with his 50 Deathwing Terminators, he was quite new, he's quite inexperienced. He's like, I've got basically one data sheet, I'm going to run it out, see what happens, right? Yeah. He was keeping that as simple as he possibly could. He had a great weekend, but he did not do well. But he'd worked to make sure he had minimal stuff he had to think about, because he was still learning the game and still working his way around it, right?
Yeah.
And I think at all levels that can be important to do. And if you have brought something that's difficult, again, have those expectations going in. Remember, I've made this difficult. I've made those choices, right? That's not on my opponent. It's not my opponent's fault. I've done this to myself. And so take that positive. Either be ready to be positive about something that's difficult, or think about how you can set those conditions up for yourself so that you're not going into an environment that's going to be stressing you out and making your life difficult.
And know your rules as well.
Know your rules.
Definitely an argument for, if you take an army which has got some complicated rules and you don't know your rules well enough, and you just end up cheating the whole weekend, unintentionally, but getting things wrong, especially to your own advantage. I think there's an interesting argument there. Is that actually fair play? Is that sportsmanship? Or is that actually not fair on all of your opponents? Because we all make mistakes, of course we do, and we've read our rules, we think we know them, and actually maybe we've got like a minor technicality wrong. But actually, if you're doing that because you've just picked up your army a week ago, I remember years ago I played into a Yanari list when they were at their pomp, and he literally picked the army up on the Friday from his mate. He had this giant tick sheet of all the different spells, and we got through 2 turns in that game, because he just spent his entire time reading off this sheet. And it was a miserable playing experience. And he was a very well-known WTC player at the time. And,
spill the beans. Spill the beans. Don't spill the beans.
We don't spill beans.
We don't need libel claims.
But Like, yeah, it was just like it was lovely. It was nice enough, but it was boring. It was really boring because he was just reading off his spreadsheet and just didn't really know how the army operated. And so you've got that balance, and the fact that if you don't know your rules and your strats that well, or your aura buffs, like Admec's a minefield. All of their auras, and you can select things. They're all different lengths. Some of them are 3 inches, some of them are 6, some of them are 9, some of them are data tellers, some of them aren't.
It's mad. It's a scary book.
And your opponent has no way of remembering them, right? So you have to just have your cards, and you have to be very clear about it. And inevitably, you will probably get it wrong at some point. But hopefully, it's not. It's not going to be a big deal in the terms of the game, and you just try and be as consistent as possible. But if you have no prep, if you don't know what army's doing, you are far more likely to be cheating your opponent.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's when all the little mistakes get made, right? Great. Okay. Right. After the game, we'll rattle through after the game. Then we'll do a couple of listener questions. Then we're home. We're home and dry. Ed, you're back in, man. After the game, what do you do?
So this is a kind of a combination of after the game and during the game.
Okay.
And it's, do not come and stand next to me at my table when I'm playing a game. For God's sake, keep your distance. Imagine it's still the peak of the pandemic. Give me 6 feet. Do not stand do not stand where I can't move around the table. Do not come up to me and start a conversation that lasts more than 15 seconds. Do not come up and talk to my opponent for a long time. Like, I'm locked in with my opponent for 3 hours, and it is so rude to either distract me away from my opponent or them away from me. 15 seconds.
Oh, you mean like
doing, mate?
people?
Go and chat to others.
Sorry, I thought you were talking about your opponent. I was like,
no. Sorry. Like 15 seconds. How are you doing, mate? Yeah, I think it's going well. Yeah, good luck. Totally fine. Great. Love it.
That's literally it. That's it. Like a flyby.
And if if you're stood there giving your opponent advice, that's a hanging offence. Get away from my table.
Absolutely don't do that. Yeah.
It's hanging.
Well,
I had that at the home turf RTT, where obviously me and Sean's game was a very short and bloody affair, and then I went to one table. I was like, oh my god, I can't be here because there's one lad playing Eldar. I was like, I can't, because I'm just going to end up saying stuff. I can't watch this game. Like, he's playing it like he's going to all these things. So I just had to take myself out of that situation and just let them all get on with it, because I wasn't going to be. There was too much game left for me to just be casually there without basically ruining the experience for them, right? So I had to just take myself out of it and go and chat with Sean, and we went outside and stayed out of it, because it's as you say, you are locked in. It's a social experience for those two players. That's who it's for at that moment in time. You don't want lots and lots of people crowding it.
You're welcome to stand and watch, but stand as if you don't know me. Don't stand next to me. Stand as if you're you're watching someone play guitar in the park. That's how far away I want you to stand.
And the fatal thing for me is stand and watch and don't talk, and I just don't have it in me, Ed. So I just have to go. I just got to go. I got to go. I got to be.
Well, that's fine. We'll just draw each other again.
Oh, it's inevitable, right? Yeah. Round 1 at Manchester. Let's do it. Anything else, Ed?
No, I think that's about it. I've already got enough anger out this episode.
Sweet. Lewis, how about you? What's good after the game?
Yeah, a couple of things actually. I think I'm keeping this really simple because my brain only operates on simple levels. But shake hands with your opponent. If they're happy with that, congratulate them on the win, commiserate them for the loss, and just have that kind of final positive interaction. Some people I've played, they want to shake hands and move on and go away. That's fine. They don't want to talk about it. Others want to have a long chat about how the game went and what they could have done differently and things like that. So you have to kind of judge that final interaction. But I think it's really important to finish on a positive note, if nothing else.
Completely.
Just to say, brilliant, well played, mate, fantastic, excellent, or unlucky. Things we could have done differently.
You can talk that out, right? You can be very clear. Again, if you need to go and have a bit of decompressing, you just say, I'm going to go and decompress, but I'll come see you in a bit, whatever else, And so end of the weekend this time, partly because of the environment, partly because I've been a bit run down from work the last couple of weeks. I really needed to go and basically just sit outside and breathe cool air for a few minutes after that game. And I was like to Nick, who we had a great game, we had loads of fun. I was like, Nick, I'm just going to go and cool off. We'll come chat about it later, and we chatted about it afterwards. But it's knowing what people need in that moment. Yeah. Again, it's the communication, isn't it? It's always just setting out where you're at. Absolutely, Davey. How about you?
All right. Well, I have a slightly different approach. After I've made them sign my book of losers, I like to flick them 50 pence for the bus. Just say, sayonara, sucker.
I don't believe you're Northern at all. A true Northern wouldn't give anyone any money for anything.
That's very fair. That's very fair.
And what bus can you get that's only 50p? What world are you living in?
I'm not paying for their entire bus, Lewis. God, they lost the game, not me.
You can buy a reader because they're a terrible company.
Davey, can we get you an actual book of losers to take around?
It will be a very short book. Tom, I think out of this group, Tom's the only person to be in it. But then again, I've only played Ed once, and I've never played Chris.
Absolutely. I'll be in that book. I can sign it on behalf of my Incarn.
Yeah, that was it. All I have to do to beat Tom is play an army he's played once before. No, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because you've got the classic, what could have went differently and stuff like that. But I find those conversations go so differently with people. It's tricky. I think for me personally, again, it's understanding what, as Tom says, it's understanding what people want. Half the time, I really don't want to talk about the game after playing it for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And almost, I don't know. I think I'll probably just take your advice actually and just go, right, I'm just going to go stand outside for a second and breathe some cold air and then come back in and then maybe be ready to talk about it because it's quite emotionally draining, to be quite honest with you. Yeah,
it is.
But yeah, as I say, Lewis is right. High five, shake hands, GG, and man, it's pretty straightforward stuff, right? It's just don't be a douche.
Don't be a dick. Although I think I would actually add to that in terms when you are discussing the game, if that's the conversation you want to have. One thing that does frustrate me sometimes, and something I always try and avoid doing because I think it's a good opponent thing to do, is to avoid blaming the dice.
Yeah.
I think we can all...
amazing that we've got this far without mentioning it. Because
I think we can all say times where, in our opinion, it was all down to awful dice rolls, and that may well be the case. Fair enough, it's a dice game; it's going to happen. But I think what you'll find with the top players, the best players, very rarely will they complain about dice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because actually, they will be the ones who are able to manipulate their army, manipulate their opponent's army in such a way that their chances of stuff going wrong is much reduced.
Yeah.
I think if you're in a position where you were relying on a single 4+ roll to win or lose the game, something has gone wrong in terms of your planning of the game. The best players will stack the odds in their favour to a point where they can roll poorly and still achieve the objectives they need to achieve. So I think blaming the dice is something that doesn't really reflect well on your opponent. If your opinion of the game or your response to the game is, I just rolled so poorly. If your opponent might have actually just played really well, and they might have just beaten you fair and square, and you just had a shooting phase where you failed a few more saves than you thought you were going to fail, and apparently that was the end of the world. I don't think that is the case. I'm known for not being able to roll any invulnerable saves for my knights, but I can get around it by positioning myself in a way that only a certain number of units can shoot at those knights, so that even if I don't roll very well, I've still got stuff left. And anyone that's played knights, a knight on 1 wound is just as dangerous as a knight on 30 wounds. So
that's it, man. I think you're totally right. I think you should. I think that's definitely one thing to do is say you did really well when you did this or something along those lines. If it was Chris, I'd be like, Chris, you did really well when you spent 2 CP to retreat those horses away from me that I didn't know about. Things like that. No, I'm kidding though, but great point, Lewis. Again, Lewis is man of the match, I think, for this podcast in terms of really, really salient points.
I've been playing for a very long time.
This is why when we had him on it once, we were like, we have to steal him. There's no other way. We listened to him for about an hour and a half. I was like, nope, put him in the bag, take him away. We want him. He's great.
Well, I haven't had a chance to go to an event yet and bring your rankings down. So
we'll see.
We'll see how you feel after the next event.
There's some people at Southampton chatting very positively about you. They thought you were an excellent signing. So, maybe you're a little better than you're letting on. We'll see. I'll be interested to see how you get on.
I did have a fan at the LGT. I've never had a fan before. They obviously, because the 2 Valiants is a bit of a meme, but it is also, I think it's quite good. And someone had been following either my Instagram or something like that, and I played him in the 3rd round with his Necrons in the LGT, and he literally came running up to the table, and I was like, this is a bit strange. He's like, I've always wanted to play your list. This is amazing. It's fantastic. It's brilliant. And then he proceeded to completely annihilate me. I was like, okay, great. I don't think I like fans.
I said to you at LGT as well, because obviously I was talking to Jay when you came over, but I'd been at Newcastle, seen your list, and gone, "Fuck, I want to play that list." And then you came over at LGT. I was like, "Oh, cool! I don't understand how this works," and you explained it to me, and I still didn't understand how it worked. It's the big Stompy boys. They're such a draw.
Yeah. They're amazing.
They're a laugh.
It looks incredible.
And I think you made the point earlier, Tom, about having a good time. I think you've got to identify what having a good time means to you. I think if you enjoy chasing things around, trying to be the best of the best, great. If that's what gives you joy, and that's what's going to make you a good opponent because you're enjoying yourself, crack on, knock yourself out. For me, I pick models I like, and I just think this will be really cool. This will look amazing, and I try and make it work. And eventually, if there's enough practice, I'll get it to make it work, and then it becomes quite funny. And then I enjoy either way. I enjoy the process, and I enjoy the end result. So,
absolutely.
If you're enjoying yourself, your opponent's probably going to be enjoying themselves.
I like to find what's sort of cinematic or narrative about any game I'm playing, like whether even a top tier competitive game. So again, this Dark Angels Takari match, it looked amazing, right? You've got these little boats all hidden around all the edges. You've got this big wall of Terminators in the middle, and a few things about the current state of the meta. You could be making that conversation all about, oh, Dark Angels are a bit strong. Wow. Poor old me with my now not so good Takari that are still really good actually. Blah blah blah. But actually, it just looked amazing. It was a super cool thematic game, and whatever the ins and outs of who had slightly better maths or points efficiencies, whatever, it looks great, and you can have a good time with that. My opponent, I played a league game yesterday, and the lads played Votan into my GSC. Does not have a prayer in that game. It's a really difficult matchup for him in all sorts of ways. But he was having a great time with taking photos. You got these cool moments with sort of different, like Hearthguard fighting pure strains, getting pinned against a land fortress, all sorts of stuff where there are these moments in the game where it can look and feel really interesting and cinematic. And the actual outcome of the game doesn't have to dictate everything about how you enjoy and interact with it. And I think that's really important to have. Definitely.
As well,
Chris, you got anything to add? Oh, sorry, Ed, you go.
If you have the right attitude, you're going to learn the most from losses. I've learned the most from being smashed by good players. You learn very little by winning because you're like, I did the right things, woo! And then you get your ass handed to you by someone really good, and you're like, oh shit, didn't even think I could do that. Spot on. I'll do that next time, or watch out for it next time.
Yeah,
and I think even if you got a good army, you can't expect to go and win with it straight away unless you are already an amazing player. I know with the Knights, I think I said it last time. Over a year before I won anything, I was going 1-4 at events for a year, basically with those two Valiants, and then it clicked. I was like, right. Instead of just piling them forwards, I can actually afford to play Katie with these units because they got such a massive threat. People will stay away from them, and that gives me a lot more ball control than people would expect I would have. And then suddenly, as soon as I did that, and it's like actually it's more about when I jump on people, not going in as quick as possible to do as much damage as possible. It changed my whole view of the game, and suddenly I went from 1-4 to 4-1, and winning a few. So it just takes a lot of practice to do that, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Chris, you got any last points for this?
I think you've covered all the main things. I think you've spent 3 hours with someone, you've probably got quite a good read on them as a person, and that might well kind of facilitate how you go your final discussion. I know if I lose a game, I'll always ask them, is there anything I should have done differently? Because I'm very much all about every game is a learning opportunity. Even if I've won, to be honest, if the person wants to talk about the game, I'd be like, is there anything? I think sometimes, as we said about dice, sometimes your opponent's just like, the dice, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, fair enough, I'll give you that. And you clearly, therefore, don't want to talk about what you could have done differently. I'm not about to go, your dice weren't great. However, you shouldn't have done this. That's not...
that is the flip side to it, isn't it? Is that actually sometimes I think for some people it's preferable. That's sort of if they don't want to do it differently, they don't want to do it, but that's fine. That's the way they want to look at it. That's okay, and they can have that. Right? That's
exactly. I want the your most of your lasting memory of the game is probably going to be the end of the game, and that's certainly how you feel when you leave. Is those emotions. So. Whatever it needs to be for it to be a positive experience, compliment them on something they did. Just we all like compliments, don't we? So it's just that positive mindset, and that's kind of it. And then later on in the tournament, you see them, ask them how they're getting on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just it's not just a one-off experience. You're probably going to see them various tournaments again. So just catch up with them. It doesn't have to be a long chat. Oh, how you getting on? What have you got next? Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Those like minor little things, just they go a long way, don't they?
Yeah, it's super lovely to check in on people like that. I say the one that always stays with me is the lad I played at LGT my first game who had like 120 demonettes, and I've last LGT saw him again. Hopefully he'll be out there the third time. Check in, see how he's getting on, see what he's running these days. And I love those little connections that you can make, and yeah, you can always keep coming back to those, can't you? Great. Okay. Awesome. Well, that's how you can go and be a good opponent. I guess you could write all those down and then do the opposite if you wanted, as to be an anti-hero. So
let's not be Chris. Come on.
I have lied all episode.
Chris is an absolute gent to play.
His nose has been getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, much as I'd love to go after him, he is a very good sport when he plays. Right. Okay. We're going to rattle off a couple of little listener questions to finish off, and then we'll get out of here. So what we got? Oh, we got a question for Ed, don't we?
Am I allowed to leave questions? It was listener questions, but now I've just been continuing to leave them.
I think you're absolutely allowed to.
It's a pretty big ego trip now.
Yeah,
you just read
still
my
a listener,
questions.
Lewis.
There's no hard and fast rules with this, Lewis. It's fine.
Do you guys listen to your own? Because I have been listening to these episodes, the ones that I've been in. I've been listening to all of them anyway, obviously, but in particular, I have been listening to ones that I'm in. I don't know if that's sad or not.
No, I think it's fine. In some ways, it's you're listening back to a whole bunch of people, not just yourself.
Yes.
I don't listen to a ton of stuff that I am in. I said it was really fun listening to a show the other week where I was not in it, so I could really just enjoy it. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's fun. So here's a question for Ed: if you had the choice, would you rather fight 100 falchion-sized Hormigants or 100 Hormigant-sized falchions?
I'm going to have an aneurysm. I'm not even super opposed to the idea of fun models, but somehow I've turned into just a comedy villain, and the dice has been rolled, and thus the role shall be played. I would rather take the Hormigant-sized falchions, because fuck, it would feel good to stomp on all of those little motherfuckers. I would crunch them below my feet, and I would watch as their yellow chassis broke like eggs below the boot that I wear. And I hope that fucking makes you happy. You dumb fuck.
Oh, so good.
Just to shout that a falchion-sized Hormigaunt would be absolutely terrifying.
Yeah,
because they're fast. Okay, they don't have any guns, but they are fast.
Yeah. Also, just advice for framing this question in future, Lewis. It's typical to go for one falchion-sized Hormigant rather than 100, because obviously 100 falchion-sized Hormigants is infinitely more dangerous.
I didn't even.
That's a very good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, in terms of how you wrote the question, there is room for improvement for next time. Typically, people mix up the numbers to avoid that being an obvious choice. Yeah, very good. Okay, very nice. So another question: is Ed near the Birmingham area? Felt sorry for him that he has no one to practice with, which is obviously very sympathetic.
Yeah, I live in Nottingham. I do have some local practice partners. They're just not on the team, and thus I will continue to. Some would say gently persuade, others would say bitch and moan, until some of the team download TTS. And...
Yeah, no, I'm going to do it. I'll do it. I'd like to get some practice in, so I will. There's a couple of people I've been chatting to at events recently who it's people I'm going to struggle to actually go and play. So I will try and get like one every couple of weeks into my roster as something that I'll be doing.
I struggle to play more than once every couple of weeks unless I'm on like a run up to an event. It's very difficult. I find it hard to treat it as competitively, but they're good learning experiences, especially if you've got an opponent that you can talk through and you're sort of playing together as opposed to against each other.
You have to in that environment, don't you? But I think it's super good for that, and we've seen in the scene in general how beneficial that is for a bunch of players. So so then we have from Ultimate Funk: what is the one faction in 40k you would never collect, even if they were top of the meta and had an 80% win rate? And bear in mind, we can hold you to this forever.
Necrons.
Okay. Why, Davey?
It's so cool.
Because it's stupid.
Right, that's our intro clip.
That's as far as I go with it.
Okay.
That in depth. No, I just don't like it. Like, I'm just not a big fan of like anything about them.
Just hate them so much you can't even synthesize it into a response.
Lewis, I don't even think it's hate. I think it's just ambivalent.
Loathing.
It's like, what is
I
this?
don't even know who you are.
What is this? Get it away from me.
You can tell he's a Tyranid player. There's no biomass there, is there?
No, exactly. Yeah, nothing for him to consume. How about you, Lewis?
So I think, and this is going to piss off a lot of the community, I should imagine, don't really like Chaos in general.
What? Games Workshop.
Bratty, aren't they? I mean, after 10,000 years, you haven't won anything, so just shut up and get back in line.
Lewis, you've been on about how it's not always about the winning. Do you not? Does that appeal to you?
I mean, 10,000 years. Like, if I had played Valiance for 10,000 years, yet to win anything, even I would probably have given up by that point.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, that's interesting. It always fascinates me how some players are just Chaos types or not Chaos types.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I must have a hero complex. I'm quite a small individual, so I'm probably trying to get myself some gratification or something by playing the hero.
Oh, that's no good. If you're my nemesis and you're small, that means that you're the underdog. That means there's no way I can win, no matter what happens. I'm just doomed to fail.
One day that Falchion is going to one-shot something important in your life.
I hope not.
Maybe that flag.
My will to live.
Ed, do you have a faction in mind?
See,
Imperial Fists.
I started playing when I was 8. And thus my approach to the hobby was, ooh, shiny. And thus new models are like plastic crack. So I'm like, y'all gotta need more of those new models. There's literally nothing. I have played everything. I will play everything. So I'm going to give you the cop-out answer of Titan Legions, because I wouldn't take 2,000-point models to an event. And that's the best I can do for you, my man.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I appreciate that. How about you, Chris?
I'm looking down the list of different armies.
Yeah, that's where I've gone as well.
To see one I haven't collected. So, I mean, these days it would probably be Orcs or Imperial Guard. Orcs, I think, are really cool, and I actually would, but the amount of effort to build up an Orc army from scratch, no interest. And Guard, I had them. In 8th, I used parts of like Guard, but I never ran them like fully as Guard. And they come out, they're really good. They just don't really appeal. To be honest, also Space Marines, like generic Space Marines. I've done it in the past with Space Wolves, but there's no appeal to me for that. Grey Knights are the only ones in that area. I've got a giant box of Tyranids because I think they are really fun, but I haven't started working on them yet.
You do,
Tau, I think in some ways I really like Tau, but they're just dirty Tau, so I don't know if I'd ever do it.
Ed nodding along. Yeah.
And I would say no to Chaos Space Marines, but I do have a Alpha Legion.
Yeah, you got to finish your Alpha Legion, mate.
Well, then
you've got your combat patrol with the Dark Apostle and the Hellbrute to get on the table.
One day soon. So I guess probably the army I'd see myself least playing ever would be Orcs or Guard, one of them.
You've got to paint a lot of straps.
I would
love painting leather straps for Orcs.
So if someone wants to build
I think Orcs would be super fun to do, but our very own John Scrivens is, ever since I've met him, he's been the guy I play against who plays Orcs. I don't think I could take that away from him. I couldn't be stepping on his turf.
You have to be prepared to shout "Wah" at full volume in the middle of a tournament.
Otherwise you're not really.
See, controversial opinion in the pluses. I think that makes me want to die inside, especially because I played Orcs for an 8-month stretch, and especially there were times I would be playing an Orc mirror match, and someone across the hall would shout "Wah," and our eyes would lock, and we'd just be like, I want to die. I can't do it.
I do remember going to a 50-person event once. I can't remember where it was. Might have been a Hellstorm one, maybe not. Where the Orc player wanted to call a Wah, and he managed to convince 49 other players to join him for his Wah against his opponent. So the whole tournament Wah'd into his opponent. Which was quite funny.
That's terrifying. I don't mind it on the Saturday. I hate it on the Sunday. I think that's the moratorium. I'm hungover and a bit fragile on Sunday. On my way to my how many losses I'm about to have into some scary people. I don't need Orcs screaming in the back. That's not the time. I've just looked down the list, and there is genuinely one for me. There is only one on here that I think I can rule out. I think anything else is fair game, but I will never play Custodes. I don't get it. I don't like Custodes. They're not for me. Don't like Golden Boys. I think I like the baddies and the weirdos, and some very muscly, handsome men in golden armor is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, and I'm not that bothered about them. I think also, and this is an interesting thing, because they came out in the sort of wilderness university era in which I was not plugged into or thinking about the game at all, there is no emotional purchase for me at all, whereas almost everything else in the game existed when I was a kid, or I was more aware of it when I was a kid, and that's actually deep down why I love most of it in the first place. And for some reason, Custodes were never bedded in like that, so that I don't have that attachment to them.
Yeah, you kind of like. I mean, that's in with your personality, Tom. You're very anti-establishment.
Yeah, I just like the weirdos. I do like the
Small
weirdos.
counterpoint. What if you painted them red? Would that make you feel better about?
Oh God, here we're sending everyone. Modern Earth is coming back out again.
No. These were painted legitimately with red, an actual red paint.
Yours are very nice, Ed. And I love playing against them. I don't mind playing against them. They present a particular challenge. They're just not one that nothing about collecting them appeals to me.
No.
We had a question from Aaron, which is which member of 6++ would be which Primarch? And Aaron, don't worry, that is a whole episode. And we'll do a whole episode on that next time out. That should be very fun. Maybe you can come on and tell us which one you think you would be. I'll be very curious to find out. Then we've got Chen has decided to post up follow-up comments. Chen, this isn't the podcast comments tab, is it? That's not on, but I'm going to indulge you anyway. So, number one, Admech. Oh, now there's a question. Where is your head at with meta direction at UKTC with them? I'm going to aim this at Chris. Lucius, by the sound of things. So, Chris, spill the beans. What's the magic? Where are you going to go with Admech?
I think there's 3 ways. There's Tom's way. Oh, sorry, there's 4 ways. There's Tom way, Riser, 30 Rothstalkers, +1 to charge, +1 to wound.
Blood and Rust.
Loads of Dragoons. Have a great time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that works on heavy boards. I think there's been quite a lot of success with Mars MSU, like lots and lots of 5-mans with plasma because you get your rerolls, and I think that can do some serious work. And then you've got your 2 blocky builds. You've got Agrippina, which is extra AP at half range, and like a Warlord trait aura type thing, which is shoot on death on a 4-up. Which enables you to trade really, really well, and obviously is very good into even like Deathwing Terminators and that sort of thing. And I think in those lists you want to be running auto cannons as well as the Las Chickens. So like 2 big blocks of those to maximise that AP, because auto cannons at -2 with that number of shots with 2 damage is very strong. And then you've still got your blocky type units, and then you've got Lucius, which is again kind of like 60 troops. 2 units of 4, Las Chickens, some sort of combat punch, either Dragoons or Rothstalkers. And I think that's kind of where it's at. And I think, in my opinion, it's Agrippina or Lucius. Those are your 2 choices. I think blocky is the way to go. And it depends. Do you want transhuman and teleport? Or do you want shoot on death and extra AP at half range? I think that's kind of your decision. I like Lucius. That's what I'm going to be running. But I may well try out Agrippina after just to see what it's like. But yeah.
Definitely.
You completely neglected to mention 50 Cataphron breaches.
Oh, yeah.
List as well, which I'm very excited to play at some point on TTS because I will never buy those armor. Those
Run 50 of them, see what happens. You can, there is a way of giving them full rerolls in combat. But it's so funny, when the book first came out, everyone was like, oh, no wonder they didn't get core. They'd be so strong if they had core. They got core. No one's still using them. That's not a thing.
The game is very different.
So far, more effort has been put into one Goonhammer article telling you what you could do with them than into actually trying to do anything with them, as far as I can see. So they remain a myth, and people have the models.
Funky models as well.
Yeah, people have the models.
Really cool.
Nobody has 50 of them, though, right?
Nobody had 50 of them.
Rickard Nelson does from Sweden.
And I feel like it is very much an overwhelming. It's a stat checklist. It's worse Deathwing Terminator.
There is 100% definitely play there. Toughness 5, 2-up save, 3 units. The shooting could be brutal. The combat's just like
it's the fact they're good at both is quite
they're very good. It's just hitting on 4s.
Yeah, and do you want to play that list? Is always a big
yes, please.
Will you enjoy it?
Yes.
I think I lean on this. My heart says Riser, but my head says Lucius. I think Riser you could have a lot of fun with right now, and then Lucius, a teleport on something that dangerous in the meta we've got is just great to have. It's just really great to have, and then the durability is obviously also fantastic. So it's really hard to look past it, I think.
Yeah,
I'll post my list.
Massive damage wherever you want it.
That's it, and because everyone else is doing that right now, I think being able to bring one of those to the party yourself is just super good.
I know as a player, I hate my opponent being able to teleport around or having deep strikes to come in. So the fact that I can put 80 shots at -2 AP, hitting on potentially 2s, just
pretty
in your
funny,
back,
right?
Pretty jokes. So,
you can pick up probably 60 neophytes if you back yourself. That could be quite fun to try.
Absolutely, or 60 Vanguard, auto wounding on force to hit.
Yeah.
Bye any demons.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then Chen's other comment was Saffron Slam is now vicious. You did this. So having had no part in this, who wants to explain what Chen means and why we've ruined Saffron Slam?
I'm not sure vicious is the right word. Well, I think we touched on it a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? It's not the most competitive event in the world. It's not going to be because the terrain is really dense, really cool terrain, but it's not UKTC terrain. So you could always argue that it might favour one player over another. Try and avoid that as much as we can, but that's always going to be a potential case. So I think that the competitive parallels you can draw from that event are probably limited. It's just a right blast. And I think there are a lot of players that are quite good at actually playing on the same boards over and over and over and over and over again, event after event after event. Probably want to try something a bit different.
100%.
That's what we're trying to achieve, but that does mean that we have a bit of a system where we have some very, very good players coming to our events, which is great. But it does give the feeling sometimes it can be a shark tank at the top, but we kind of balance that with the fact that we really, really push the inclusivity and the welcoming atmosphere. And I've knowing a lot of the top players as well as I do now, they come into it knowing what I'm trying to get out of the event. And that I'm trying to make it an event that people who have never played 40k tournament before can come to, play some of the best players, but still have an absolute blast, and not just get destroyed. Or if they do get destroyed, doing it in a nice way. So and I think the crucial thing is those top players, you guys at 6++ here, and those from other teams that come are keyed into that as what the event is about and what the
buying into the spirit of it. Yeah,
100%. So
because you'd have to be a real tosser to try and win it, wouldn't you? You'd have to be an absolute. and that's
twice in a row. But I mean, even Chris, we take the piss. But when he did come, he was an absolute gentleman to play against.
Oh, of course, absolutely, yeah.
Not had any problems.
And someone's got to win the thing, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%. So
that's cool.
So I think there's probably some good players.
Something really weird to get in with the vibe. But I haven't decided.
It's a good training ground for that. Jack Tite loves bringing his Thunderhawk gunship. And going 4-1 with it. So
thank you very much for those, Chen. I was only joshing with you about the comments, questions. Just mucking about. I think that's all the questions, isn't it? Have we missed anything?
Pretty much.
Great. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening to this mammoth of a show. Really fun to have everybody on. And next time we're going to work out what Primarch we all are. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be loads of fun. So we will join you again for that in the future. We have been the Pluse. Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Love you. Bye.